pervasive criminality that I think is surprising most everyone.
Everybody is glued to their TVs, their phones, on Facebook, just to hear from people who had killed people, from people who had tortured people.
Yaya Jammeh told you what?
He told me clearly, we have to execute the ringleaders.
And that is what you did?
Exactly.
Yaya Jammeh said, let's kill these people and cut their flesh into pieces.
Cut them up into pieces?
Cut them up into pieces.
Like they would do meat?
The Gambia was a place where a dictator was operating undercover. Some people liked Jammeh, loved him, and didn't believe what people were telling them.
My dad went missing when I was just 14 years old. He broke my family into pieces, and then he broke so many families into pieces. Sometimes I find it so hard to understand these things.
We have also seen a lot of non-Gambians being killed in Gambia, being imprisoned. We have seen the Ghana 44 and all the other people who were massacred in Gambia for nothing.
Solo said these people are mercenaries. The order from the head of state, the former president, Yaya Jammeh, is they are all to be executed.
There was a whole system for him to exploit, for him to rape.
He said, let's see if you are a virgin. And swear to God, I was scared.
A month after losing elections in December 2016, he fled the country and sought exile in Equatorial Guinea. For the victims to see videos of him dancing with his host instead of answering their charges in a court of law is very painful.
I just have one wish. I wish I will have the opportunity to face Yaya himself and then ask him why he had to kill my dad.
The least that a victim needs is the truth. So the testimonies and the stories of these people makes people know who Jammeh really was. Justice for all of those people means Jammeh would pay for everything that he had done.
That's the Jammeh to Justice, campaign video there that was done by the Human Rights Watch. Now, the video basically captures some of the themes that the Commission investigated, including how the AFPRC came into being, the November 11, attempted coup during which 11, members of the armed forces were unlawfully, summarily executed. We also had the, April 10-11 students' demonstration, the attack on the media, attack on religious freedoms, attack on road users, the killing of the West African migrants, which is one of those themes that the Commission also investigated. And of course, they also had institutional hearings as well. But first things first, before I engage Mr. Mboj, let me begin with, Mr. Fati. Does the Commission have any constitutional or legal backing?
Yes, the Commission itself is a creation of statute, Trrc Act 2017. So it wasn't a commission set up by the President dwell on certain provisions of the Constitution, like you have the Jammeh Commission. This one was a little bit more specific. So the National Assembly passed an act establishing Trrc, giving it a very specific mandate to interrogate human rights abuses and violations that occurred from 1994 to January 2017, essentially to establish the truth, identify those who bear the greatest responsibility, and to make recommendations for such individuals in respect of criminal accountability in terms of prosecution.
I'll engage, Father Jao as well on this. I actually asked the question because there's still a lot of people who are in denial, and you know, we have people who even came all the way to the commission and you know, questioned the legality of, you know, having the commission itself in the first place. Just to have you say a word or two on that as well. The commission's, you know, the legality of the commission itself.
Okay, thank you so much. Just to add on top of what my learned senior said, it was good that you started with him because he's my senior at the bar, so I will always speak after him. So actually, what he said is right. It's clear that the mandate of the National Assembly is to enact laws, that is to make laws with the president. So the TRRC Act is a public document, and it's something that really it's legal because it went through all the processes that a bill needs to go through in order for it to become a law. So the act is legal, and really I think sometimes people just express their dissatisfactions and opinions in a wrong way, but to say the TRRC was not legal, that would be misleading. So I have the opinion that it was legal because it is backed by law.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Mboj, big historic day for Gambia.
Oh, absolutely. Momentous time. I mean, we've all been waiting for this. I mean, we've just talked about here the act that established the commission. So that act will have its own history. This is just another milestone moment, isn't it?
Sure.
We have to go through just over 2 years of hearings, didn't we? So now they're done. They give the report to the president. Now we're going to get the white paper. So you're going to have all these different stages. And next is going to take a long time. We understand that they've recommended for the prosecution of 70 alleged perpetrators.
Sure.
Can you imagine how long that will take? So, as I call it, the act itself, in reality, would unfold as it should. But today, it's a momentous moment. We've been looking forward to this. What is the government going to do with the recommendations?
All right, so we would be, you know, linking with our colleagues at the Sadauda Keraba Jawara Conference Center where the ceremony itself is taking place. But before that, you know, let me engage Mr. Fati again. What do you make of the Commission's work? It took over 2 years investigating, you know, some of these crimes. We know, especially with issues of persons, I mean enforced disappearances rather. The Commission, I mean, really struggled with some of these cases, and it shows just how difficult it has been for them as well. But what do you make of, generally, what do you make of the Commission's work?
I think the TRRC did a fantastic job. It is my opinion that it is perhaps the most important public inquiry you know, undertaken in the history of the Gambia, because the TRRC was mandated to inquire into serious human rights abuses and violations that occurred over a 22-year period. Human rights abuses and violations that occurred systematically by the state, because for the most part it was state institutions pursuant to a certain state policy. So therefore, to unearth all that and to establish the truth, because a lot of Gambians, a lot of us, for a lot of the claims in the past, we actually thought these were myths, or some of the violations that occurred were done by foreigners. So the TRRC was, if nothing else, the fact that TRRC was able to establish for perpetrators to testify and own to really horrendous crimes that were committed, and for victims to also be given the agency and the platform to articulate their victimhood, the suffering that they've gone through, and for the TRRC to essentially lay bare the extent of those abuses and violations and make appropriate recommendations, reparations, reconciliation, and several others in terms of institutional reforms. So I think overall, obviously 22 is a very long time. So the TRRC would not have been able to cover everything, but essentially, I think the TRRC did a fantastic job.
Great. Yes, Madam Jao?
Yes. So it's always good to acknowledge the good work of people. So in my opinion, they really did a very good job because remember they were digging into issues that were like prohibited to deal with or talk about at one point, because during the 22 years you cannot even comfortably sit in a radio station or a TV platform to discuss basic human rights issues. So the fact that they were there to unveil the truth and all that was which was concealed during the 2 decades of a regime that was labeled by dictatorship and mass human rights violations. It's not easy because their job was very sensitive. It was a job that you needed to be confidential. You needed to cease from some of your activities and interactions with the public. You have to be a whole different person to be able to conduct the job that was given to you by the TRRC. So the fact that they have done that, and we have seen the work that they have done, coming up with like 16 volumes, you know, it's not just sitting down and narrating or writing stories. It's more than that, because everything that is in that volume, these are facts that they extracted from their sittings and from people. So actually they did a fantastic job, notwithstanding like people have their reservations about the public hearings or their procedures or some of the recommendations made against certain people, which is normal. Because if for example, I am indicted or recommended to be punished, probably I might not be happy. Then there is always a way for me to find a blame but overall, I think Gambians need to appreciate the fact that they carried out their mandate as indicated by the Act.
Mr. Moj.
Absolutely, I think Mr. Fati, you're completely correct. The most important public inquiry in our history. And when you look at the process, the format for the 2 years, we've been following things. I mean, you have to accept nobody perceived a kind of unfairness going on. You know what I mean? So it all went well. We had one witness who came sort of with his own rudeness, with his antics, the shenanigans we saw that day, but that was his misjudgment. You see, in the end, he was the one that been taken to court and now been found guilty, and others came who were actually his seniors in the hierarchy of the AFPRC and delivered. So it tells you that that was really his misjudgment. So, but overall, we were all glued to our TVs, weren't we? When what you said earlier, most of us thought that these crimes were being perpetrated by foreigners. Extraordinary. So it was the TRRC Commission that disabused me of that naive thinking. It was just sloganeering. Smiling Coast, well, the Smiling Coast became the Snarling Coast on the Yaya Jame. So that was all exposed thanks to the TRRC. Extraordinary feat, really. And the variation on the theme, really, this modern Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, really, it was the South African model, really, which they took that Nuremberg trial of war criminals, but we didn't want to go for pure prosecutions. There was a variation on the theme. South Africa innovated, if you like, and then we copied that and added reparations. They didn't have that. So we also put our own little twist onto the whole thing.
Just to add, sorry.
Yes,
sure. Actually, ours was different. Ours was the only one to actually have reparations as part of its mandate.
All right.
Because the other ones is normally the truth and prosecution. So normally it is left to government almost as a discretionary vehicle to decide on the issue. But ours felt that it was so integral and important that that was included as part of the act establishing the TRRC.
You've all given us a picture of, you know, the Gambia, as it were, during the Jammeh days, the challenges, the environment, and the fact that, you know, you had so many Gambians, like I said earlier, denying that in fact some of these, alleged crimes were committed by fellow citizens. If anything, what should the TRRC findings teach us? Yeah, go for it.
I think just like you would find anything that is associated with the TRRC, never again. So perhaps the lesson would be that really that dark history that we went through should never be revisited
on our people and in this country again. But that can only be realized if the TRRC wasn't, the whole exercise was in a vacuum. So hopefully the recommendations in terms of genuine reforms, institutional reforms, the state actors that perpetrated, for the most part, these really horrendous crimes. So if the lessons learned from the TRRC in terms of genuine transformative reforms are embraced at the level of the state and the entire state architecture and machinery, then hopefully we will never have to have this kind of exercise again. So the truth, perhaps, of Mr. Mboj said have probably sort of awoken us from that slumber of denial to the reality that Gambians are capable of committing really horrendous and unimaginable crimes on their fellow citizens. And this happened not in isolation, no, sporadically. This happened for 22 years.
There was a system.
There was a system.
Yeah. All right, Fatu.
Yes. One of the lessons that I believe we should learn from, or the TRRC taught us or should teach us, is the fact that, there is nothing that would not be accounted for. And then as a government or as a people, whatever we do, we make sure we do the right thing. Because you might have the power to perpetrate certain things and believe that you might not be accounted for them. And this is a clear manifestation that no matter how long you have been perpetrating evil or bad things, there must be a day that you must be brought to book. So this is one thing that most especially our duty bearers, that you should not be abusing the office that you have because you think you would not be whole accounted or you're more powerful. And then another lesson would be for always to people to know that you must serve the interests of the people that put you in there. That is another lesson. And then really I want to even comment on the fact that Gambians were naive to believe that certain things were done under our corridors, and then our own brothers and our own sisters were involved in the commission of such inhuman treatments or acts. So this is a lesson for everyone, that if you're given an opportunity to serve, it doesn't mean you're giving an opportunity to perpetrate evil or your interest on people. So we all learn.
Yes, absolutely. What do they say again? The trajectory of history. It's long, but it bends towards justice. Quite extraordinary. You can run, but you can't hide. Sooner or later, it will find you out somewhere. So one of the lessons for me, actually, Sana Sabali just told us from the clip, the video we just saw. Yaya Jammeh told him to go and do something. He did it. When I looked at the Jana Commission and the obedience, you know what I mean? We were so obedient. There was none of that critical engagement. No, this is not part of my job. I shouldn't do this. I know that it is wrong. I'm not going to do it. I know that there's a price to pay. But now I understand the writers who say that only brave people can be free. It was extraordinary. A lot of brave people died. Absolutely, we must concede that and really salute them, as it were, for the valor, for the courage. But this is it, for me, this is a key lesson. You have to be brave. As they established at Nuremberg, only lawful orders are binding. I shouldn't follow it. I think that's a key lesson. Another one, I remember 1994, 22nd of January, 22nd of July, as if it happened yesterday. We were all grown-ups, we were here. We had just returned from Sierra Leone, July, actually the same month. And we saw what was going on. People I thought were Democrats, suddenly overnight were supporting Yaya Jammeh. Everybody, almost everybody. So some of us were asking, okay, would you say that the former President Jawara rigged elections? They will tell you no. But I said, we have a system of changing government. We must become either principled Democrats or not. You know what I mean? Make up your mind. Because if we had got up and said, no, we believe in democracy, we put him in there, maybe. So that was also another lesson I've learned. And so we become collusive in our own oppression. So we must be very watchful how we deal with leadership. We've got a relatively new one in power. Let us be careful how we deal with power. Don't bend your knees easily at the arrival of new power. That was also a lesson for me. Never again depends on how brave we are.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say this, and you reminded me that as Gambians, we shouldn't wait until things are bad, then we start to react. So I think that is the greatest lesson too. We should try to be proactive. We shouldn't allow these things to ever happen again. So we should take measures to make sure these things are history, but they wouldn't repeat themselves.
I mean, you talk about obeying of, you know, unlawful orders, you know, people being too obedient back then. One of the themes that the Commission also investigated first was, I mean, soldiers with a difference. How the AFPRC came into being, the institutional failures as well, you know. So, if anything, what should we learn from this? We know that, you know, we've seen, I mean, the reoccurrence of coups within the region as well. We know we've moved from that, but if anything, I mean, regarding this, I'm talking about strengthening our institutions, especially our public institutions. If anything, what can we learn from these as well? We've had, I mean, so many testimonies, you know, from people who served, you know, with the PPP government, and even, you know, during the early days of the AFPRC. You want to come first?
Yes, soldiers with a difference. So that's the sort of the forced fantasy, as it were, that we need to cast aside. Where have we seen it? I mean, for us, we had our coup in 1994. Coups had been happening in Africa for a very long time. So we were learning. We could see that by then. I mean, some of us were like, oh my God, we thought that we had escaped that bits that other places in Africa had seen. It didn't do anything. Soldiers with the difference, they were not the first to use the phrase. You know what I mean? So bad, really, it's easy to imitate bad. Even the FPRC, they copied others, the styles of others. So there was absolutely nothing different. You know what I mean? As early as August, you had all sorts of decrees. People like MC Chan by October, wasn't it? OJ. Now we know what was happening July, August, September, within few months. And then by November, what was going on? So it was bad ab initio. For some reason, I do not know why, we thought that it would be okay, it will be this, it will be that. We saw these kids, Yaya Jammeh, they are not much older than I am, so that's what I'm going to say. 1994, they were 29, 27, stuff like that. They were too young. Edward Singate, we went to school, we knew each other and the standards. We listened to them, we knew that we were about to have a harrowing experience. One could get it from day one. When they came with that, I remember that speech, oh, we are here to share in the national cake. We turned around and said, Gambia doesn't have a cake, sir.
Absolutely. But so this is why we have to learn lessons. This is why we have to try and avoid, even the current administration, we have to avoid trappings of government. We have to have strong democratic institutions. If you have strong democratic institutions that function properly, then you minimize the risk of violation and abuses, not only in relation to human rights, but also over malpractices in terms of corruption and stuff like that. So when the AFPRC came, you know, they came with this popular slogan: accountability, transparency, and probity. Like he said as well, these were borrowed from the World Bank and IMF. These were associated with fiscal discipline and good governance. So perhaps that was a very shrewd way of trying to sort of buy the support of the Gambian population by saying that we are soldiers with a difference. We came to clean up, that the PPP was endemically corrupt and stuff like. But no sooner than the junta taking the reins of power on July 22nd, 1994, within a week or so, decrees started coming in. By August, more and more decrees. So for example, decrees establishing the NIA, giving the NIA vast powers, vast police powers, and the legacies of that we're still living today. Other things as well is very soon even our court systems in a way started to capitulate under the might of the sword of gun. So in a way, the transformation of the AFPRC from soldiers with a difference to soldiers who clearly brutalized the Gambian population and strictly undermined any principle of good governance and separation of powers, because they assumed everything. So those decrees and some of the legislations that were passed by the junta, even on the very early stage, really undermined the sanctity of democracy and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. So in 2022, we have to be very careful. The Gambian people have to be very, very careful. We cannot allow any government a free will to pass laws that in any way restrict our fundamental rights and freedoms. We should not allow any government to do anything that undermines the integrity of good governance. So the lessons, putting all of this together, the lessons from the TRRC, the lessons of how the junta came and promised us heaven, but gave us hell, can only be adequately addressed if we make sure that us as a people, as a constituency, and government as an institution are always held accountable for their actions at all times, without any leeway.
Yes. So, talking about, holding people accountable for crimes they commit. Earlier, you mentioned the obeying of unlawful orders. You also did talk about people, being serious with their work. By being honest in the discharge of their duties. We've seen testimonies from, alleged perpetrators, the likes of Elijah Martins, the Sana Savalis, who said, that was the order of the day. We heard Sana say they wanted to kill us, we killed them. The disregard for the rule of law as well, that prevailed at the time. It's still on lessons we can learn from.
Yeah, so I would just go back to what I was saying initially, that whatever you do, because let's look at the first thing that comes when you assume office, especially let's say as a head of state or head of department or even a public official. Most of the time you take the prescribed oaths of office that you must
so as you can see, excuse me, on your screens, those are live images of the conference room where the ceremony would be taking place. People have already started coming in. We would link our colleague Alusise, shortly. But yes, you can go ahead.
So, like I was saying, you took the prescribed oath of office that is at all cost to uphold the laws of the country, and then you defend the integrity of your country, and you discharge your functions to the best of your ability. So when you do that, what is expected of you is to at least, to the best of your ability, do what you took the oath for. For example, like we were talking about the soldiers with a difference, where everything went wrong was when they overthrew a democratically elected government. So to me, legally we would say if something is illegal, whatever it's built on, it's illegal because the foundation is illegal. So you don't expect any legality from an illegal act. That is what I believe. So the moment you overthrew a government using the guns, actually you would use the same guns to entrench yourself in authority. because that is what you wanted. And to me, that is not the only way you could have removed a government that you never believed in. You could have just put aside the uniform and then be a civilian, go into politics. Probably you have better policies, and then you can convince the people to vote for you. So it's the same thing. The rule of law, it's something that we should not only engage as a lip service. It should be something that we should abide by. So we can see from the TRRC revolutions, I was really, really young that I cannot remember, but through the TRRC and some of the historical narrations, I could trace how things were going from the military rule to civilian government, which kind of give it a semblance of legality, even though really, yes, that is because you said now we are civilians, you can vote, and but in operation, they were actually operating in a very undemocratic way. And to me, if you ask me, I would tell you it's because they were operating within the military setting, because most of the soldiers and military personnel, with due respect, they will tell you you obey and complain. That is where the problem starts, because your commander will tell you to do something.
We had the junglers give the same excuse.
Exactly. So there is a misinterpretation there. You obey and complain. I think it's limited to only lawful orders.
And I remember, was it Malik Jatta who said the rule number one says what? The commander is always right. The senior man is always right.
Even when he is wrong. So you can see if those people are
it says when he is wrong, refer him to rule number one.
But can I also just say something as well? I perfectly agree. But to take it beyond that, the decrees were not passed by the armed forces. The decrees were passed. What came from the state law office, came from the Attorney General's chambers and the Ministry of Justice. The decrees that began to almost legitimize, to seek to legitimize the AFPR's, the overthrow, because what it did as well was to suspend the 1970 Constitution, vesting all political, executive and legislative authority to the military junta, and also making sure that those decrees had this overriding effect. So even if there were problems with the 1970, so for example, certain people were detained, they were taken to court. I think Chongan and others before Body to the Canifing here. There was nothing, but the magistrate said that even though, from a judicial point of view, there was no basis to continue their detention. However, they had to go back to mile 2 because their detention was sanctioned by a decree. Those decrees came from civilians, came from lawyers.
Very well. So yes, I was even going to get there, and it was good that you pointed that out, really. So the issue was not only the soldiers that were disregarding the rule of law, but like he said, we had people in authority that mastermind the way through dictatorship, because the soldiers would not be legally minded. They wouldn't actually be architects of how those degrees can be couched in a way that their actions would seem legal. So obviously we have sections of society that were cooperating and aiding and abetting the commission of such events that lead to where we are today. So it's the same thing. If, for example, a constitution is suspended, the next thing is, and the fundamental rights were as well. These were chapters of the 1970 Constitution that were suspended. So if that is done, then that is where everything goes wrong, because those are the things that they need to safeguard even regardless. So the 1997 Constitution was modeled in a way to make it look like it is the better constitution than the 1970, but you have those degrees inserted to be given the force of law. So still we saw ourselves we are in a democratic state because we had a new constitution and we have a whole chapter of human rights nicely polished, but the decrees were there to retract all those things. So really it was unfortunate, but the lesson to learn is that whatever we do, rule of law and respect for human rights is something that we should never do away with.
All right, before I bring in Mr. Mboj, I understand my colleague Ali Cisse is who is, at the OIC Conference Center for us, where the event is taking place. Is on the line. Aliu, good morning.
Morning, Ansumana. Thank you very much. Like you rightly mentioned, we're here at the OIC Conference Center here in Bijilo, and it's a quite a significant day for this country, a day when the government will release the white paper on the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission here at the OIC. As we speak, all the invited guests are seated, and then here with me, I have the chairman of the Gambia's National Human Rights Commission, Emmanuel Govt. Sir, thank you so much for speaking to QTV Live. How significant is this event today?
This is a very significant event, spanning from the establishment of the TRRC in 2017, the public hearings, which went on for 3 years, the recommendations of the TRRC that was submitted to the government some 6 months ago, and of course, today we all gathered here to hear from the government how it's going to implement those recommendations that has been given by the TRRC. So it's a very significant day. It will be part of the process of bringing closure to this whole process. We have had the TRRC made 427 findings. They've listened to close to 200 witnesses. They have made 218 recommendations. And in that, we are hoping that those who bear the greatest responsibilities that are named will be prosecuted. We hope that those who have been named and from holding public offices will be banned. We also hope that there will be enough funds given for reparation. Also to give effect to the never again mantra, we must have the institutional reforms that are necessary, the legal reforms, so that we'll never go back in that path that the former head of state, Yahya Jammeh, took us through in 22 years. So it is a very significant day for the victims, for all those who advocate for human rights. And as a National Human Rights Commission, it is our job to monitor the implementation, the recommendations. It is our job as the permanent premier National Human Rights Commission of the Gambia.
You talk about monitoring the implementation of the recommendations. What mechanism do you have in place to ensure these recommendations or the white paper is implemented to the latter, especially on a day when Jammeh, who is celebrating his birthday today?
Yes, we are developing a framework. If you are going to monitor, you must develop the framework. The framework that is being developed is in consultation with all the stakeholders. So the framework is being developed so that there will be effective monitoring of what is to come. It is important. But what is really important is that this country, we do not entertain impunity. You cannot talk about just reconciliation without talking about justice. So it's a holistic approach to this. And we hope that today we move on towards that, never again.
Thank you very much. That is chairman of the Gambia's National Human Rights Commission, Emmanuel Govt. The event is just about to start, so he's in worry to get back to the whole. Also with me here, I have Baba Hydra, the son of former journalist Data Hydra, who was also killed, allegedly killed by the former regime. Baba, you're a victim. How do you feel today?
I can say that the wait is over, because this was the day we've been waiting for the last, since 4 or 5 years, since Jammeh left. And finally today we'll hear, just like my big brother mentioned, what will happen to those who were doing all those crimes during the 22 years of Jammeh. Now, we have to make sure that the government implement most of this white paper, because some are still in offices, just like my big brother mentioned. And these people, they need also to face the music. So we cannot leave nobody behind. Most of these that committed the crime must pay. So that's what I have to say. Right.
Recently you were in Germany where we saw the trial of Bailo has commenced. Are you hoping to see most of these perpetrators facing the same facing justice?
It won't be the same, because for what we are having in Germany is a bit different. Because Bailo stayed in Germany, that's why he can be prosecuted there. But for the others that are in Gambia, we have to find a way, just like my big brother said earlier. We're talking about a hybrid court, but a hybrid court doesn't come cheap. We need a lot of resources. And to put that together, the government has to really work with its partners, with the international community. Just like in Sierra Leone, it cost them almost 100 million and in our own, we're talking about more than that. So we really need to see how we can also help the government, because also we have partners that we're working for, us victims, like Trial International, like RSF and other international institutions that can help. So we really need to channel all those institutions and see how they can help to make sure that impunity disappears in this Gambia.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, that was the Chairman of the Gambia's National Human Rights Commission, Emmanuel Jove, and Baba Hydra, a victim whose father, the late a former journalist, Data Hydra, was killed by the hit squad of former President Yaya Jammeh, who is currently living exile in Equatorial Guinea. And by the way, Jammeh is celebrating his birthday today, the 25th May. But, well, what birthday gift will he get from the white paper? We will know in a moment. But Ansumana and everyone in the studio, that's exactly what's happening. Like I said, I mean, the invited guests are all seated in the main hall here. And any moment from now, I mean, the government, of course, through the Minister, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Dawda A. Jallow, is going to release the much-awaited white paper on the TRRC.
Just before you leave, who amongst, I mean, you know, who is in attendance as far as high-profile individuals are concerned, or even important stakeholders within the TJ process?
I will say, I mean, Ansumana, thank you very much. I mean, we have seen invited guests from across all walks of life. I mean, I've even seen the president of the Gambia Supreme Islamic Council, Sheikh Essa Dabo, is here. I mean, I've seen security chiefs, I mean, National Assembly members, I mean, representative of the diplomatic corps are all here. I mean, civil society organizations are equally represented, and even victims of the former regime are all here. I mean, so that's exactly what's happening here, Ansumana.
Thank you very much, Aliu. We appreciate, I mean, your time. We would, of course, you know, be with you shortly. I mean, just before the event starts proper. But yes, let me engage my people in the studio again. Quite an interesting discussion there. I mean, what really struck me is the expectation. The expectation. We've heard from the chairman of the Human Rights Commission. We've heard from Baba, who is the son of, you know, who's a victim, the son of, you know, journalist Data Hydra, who was, you know, murdered by the junglers in 2004. Mr. Mboj.
Oh, absolutely. But why not? We invested so much in this. Mm-hmm. We said that we were going to take this route. Yeah. Truth, reconciliation, and reparations. Mm-hmm. So we have to honor what we said. So these people have given you their reports. There will be recommendations and all the rest of it. We know what happened. So we have to implement. So it's just a reasonable expectation. I don't think it is unreasonable. So, and we have every right to expect it and make sure that they're implemented. Of course, you're going to have talking points, obviously, because of the notion of amnesty built into it, even though I have heard, you know, there were these leaks. Well, we were getting these drips of leaks coming out saying that the government will reject all amnesties and the like. But just as we saw with the Janneh Commission, there were people adversely mentioned who were in government positions. Now, what are we going to do with that part? It's easy with the 70 to prosecute those who bear the greatest, as it were, responsibility for it. It's easy for that. But there will be those in the middle. What are we going to do? Yeah. Now, that would be a talking point, a huge talking point afterwards.
I know the Attorney General, you know, even government generally have always expressed that political will to implement the TRRC recommendations. We had similar expectations when the Janneh Commission report came out. But then, you know, for some reason, many were kind of disappointed. Are we going to see a similar trend, or is this going to be a different ball game?
Okay, thank you so much.
Considering the expectations.
Yes. So I would say no, even though a lot of people think it might be something that would just be out, like other commissions reports, like the Janneh Commission, and at the end of the day, we go to sleep. I said no because if you look at the mandate of the two commissions, it's different. So the first commission, that is the Janneh Commission, was talking about financial dealings with, you know, and to a great extent, it is about the government's monies, which are very important. But the Truth Reconciliation Commission goes to the society. It deals with killing people, torturing people, raping women, and doing all forms of inhuman and degrading treatment that wouldn't be accepted in any civilized society. So I would say it's going to be different, because victims would not sit and watch the government not do anything after the white paper. Civil society organizations would not, even the international community would not sit and wait or say, it's none of our business, because these are crimes that are covered under international crimes, customary international crimes, so international criminal law. So all these things are things that can be dealt with by international bodies,
as we saw during the Trrc's public hearings.
Yes.
You know, there were transnational crimes committed as
Exactly.
well, like the killing of for Ghanaians.
Migrants.
Yeah.
So, and again, you could see that Gambia is a signatory to most of these international treaties against torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, and then international human rights conventions. So we are not just parties who ratified and then domesticated these things to just sit and wait for the government to do it or not. But it's going to be different. And I believe the fact that the government has taken it seriously to release the white paper within the stipulated time shows how serious they are and how committed they are to ensure that these things are implemented. Because if they are not implemented, there's an insult to the country and to the person of the Gambians. Yeah. Because you cannot invest such monies, and you cannot also reveal such things that were concealed and hidden. You know, raising and freshening up wounds that were almost healing, not healing. Yeah. But the fact that somebody would sit and say, I killed your father, I killed your brother or your husband, it's like you're waking up that. So you cannot just go and sleep like that.
We're talking about hundreds of killings.
Exactly. So something must be done, and I believe it will be done.
Yeah. Mr. Fati.
No, today is really significant as one of the aspects of this whole transitional justice process, but the same, I think it was the same sort of anticipation and enthusiasm leading up to the submission of the report on November 25th to the President, and as in the Act, government must publish a white paper within 6 months. Hence today exactly, I think 6 months later. And it's also included in the TRRC Act as well for following the submission to the President for onward distribution to I think ECOWAS, AU, and ultimately the UN Secretary General. But in all of this, in all over truth commissions, the usual Achilles heel is lack of political will. So whether TRRC and our whole transitional justice trajectory fails or succeeds would largely depend on political will, regardless what we do or say. Civil society does and everything else, but without sufficient political will on part of government, normally the work is seriously undermined. So and if you look at certain activities, so for victims, for example, if you look at certain political decisions, appointment, for example, of the Speaker, Deputy Speaker, so in a way, victims and the Gambian population at large sometimes are justified in holding certain reservations and skepticism as to government's level of commitment, like political commitment to these things, because where you believe there's adequate, because those appointments are not only but they are very symbolic. In a way, it speaks to how you intend to deal with. But I've attended a workshop last week and the week before. One last week was in relation to the reparations bill. So an institution will be created, just like the TRRC, by the National Assembly to inherit the work of TRRC in terms of reparations. So that is there. And government is also saying that it is really committed to implementing the TRRC recommendation. So today is really important because today the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. So what government is saying will be largely proved by what is contained in the. But just to add something very quickly, if for example. our government fails, is unable or fails to take certain steps so far as crimes against humanity are concerned, the ICC, that is the Rome Statute, Article 17, may intervene and investigate. Obviously, there are other considerations that have to be thresholds that have to be met. The issue of whether crimes against what we have suffered here have reached the threshold for crimes against humanity is a debate. Although a lot of experts say that what happened, because early days of the regime, this is when the ICC was in, the Rome Statute was in effect. But even subsequently, from 2000 onwards, if you look at the systematic nature of the violations that occurred against civilian population, because it was widespread as well as systematic. So therefore, if you look at Kenya, very brief period, and I think 200 or so people. And if you look at the Kenyan population, maybe the population of Nairobi alone is more than Gambia. But that was referred to the ICC because they believe that even there was a very short period, but because of the gravity of it. So for us as well, the numbers are not very, very high, but proportionate to our population, then you can make this argument. If Kenya has the threshold, we may have as well. So even if our government ultimately fails to do what is appropriate, the ICC may, it's not automatic, but the ICC may intervene.
Well, thank you very much. Be reminded you're still watching This Morning on QTV. I am Ansumane Sonyasi, and with me in the studio today is Mamadou Mbodj, Fatou Jao, and lawyer Abdoulaye Fati. I mean, the government, as you're following the program, would be issuing its white paper on the findings and recommendations of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission in a moment. But before that, we'll take a short commercial break. When we return, we'll continue the discussion. Interesting discussion. Aliu called it Important Day, but also Jammeh's birthday gift. We'll be back after the commercial break.
Your favorite QCell service has gotten bigger. eFunkanta. Now you can loan bigger credit amounts to make life easier for you. Loan $75C and $100C and pay later. Yes, you heard me right. Get credit loan from $10C to $100C using eFunkanta by dialing *393#. Anytime you run out of credit, whether you want to buy Q Power, browse the internet, make urgent calls, or send SMS. eFunkanta is the service for you. Dial *393# and choose the loan amount of your choice with no hassle. For more information, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Sunyabus, the pioneers of mobile loan service in the Gambia. We innovate, others follow. Terms and conditions apply.
Looking for the fastest and easiest way to receive money transfers from abroad? Well, QMoney and RIA just made it happen. Now you can receive international money transfer from RIA directly into your QMoney account with no additional cost. Once you receive an SMS alert about your transfer, walk into any QMoney agent across the country to receive your payment for free, or use the money immediately to buy credit, Q Power, and other QMoney services. It's fast, safe, and convenient. For more info, call customer care on 133. QMoney, Sunu Kalpe. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back. You're watching This Morning on QTV, and I am Ansumane Sonyasi. And yes, before the break, we were talking about some very important issues surrounding government white paper, government commitment as well. And yes, talking about government commitment. After the commission submitted its report, the Ministry of Justice, have been having these stakeholder consultations, extensively, also engaging even some victim-led organizations, international partners, all in a bid to inform its white paper. Mr. Mbodj, what do you also make of, like I said, the government's, the showing of that political will to implement the Commission's recommendation, but to also drag along everyone, ensure that it is as inclusive as possible?
And that's how it was conceptualized. Can you remember in the beginning when Batambi was the minister, didn't he? They went around all over the place talking to people. So that was the whole idea, as it were. And fantastic, you have to consult widely because you want us to sort of have a sort of ownership, to have a sense of ownership with these documents and the decisions and all the rest of it. So that's a fantastic thing. But here we are moving on to something else. Now it's not about the talking, the words and all of that. Now it's about action. We've got this, so what next? The action. And I sort of accept, I love your argument that perhaps this is of a different dimension to the Janneh Commission. So entirely different. But again, and I think Abdullah said it, the idea of political will. It goes back to the leader. We've already established sort of the institutional weaknesses within our society. Little wonder that the lawyer said it earlier, the civilian complicity in drawing up these decrees. So this is it. Because of the nature of our institutions, I think it will take the character of the leader to establish the tone and timbre of government. That is what will work. Unfortunately, that's what it is. Well, that's what it is. So it really hangs so much on the president and what he does and all of that. But again, I'll also go to the international community. Everybody's been showing so much interest in the recommendations and what the government would do. I think even in Congress in the US, there was a resolution, passed where we were congratulated for having the fair, good elections. But again, reminded that you must implement with the RRC recommendations, granted. Here, we love the expertise. They were coming up with all sorts of ideas of how we can prosecute, given that maybe we may lack the capacity, the resources to do it, notions of a hybrid court. We hope that they will commit themselves more to help perhaps in the reparations. We were saying that we will sell off Yahya Jammeh's properties and from there we can give it to people, for the reparations. Would that be enough? So put your money where your mouth is. I think we should also say that. Since you've been so interested in what is going on here, you know our limitations, given right now the COVID and the war in Ukraine and the debt problem. We know what the society is like, how our government is like, how much would come from them in terms of cash, quite frankly.
Father, he's mentioned a very salient point there, prosecutions. Are we ready?
Well, we should be ready.
Yes.
Yes. I believe prosecutions would be an integral part of the whole process because justice must be at the center of every bit of the transitional justice process. Because justice is one way that you could compensate people, and then you could make people at least not forget, but feel that sense that okay, I have at least gotten something that would pay off what the person did. So it might not take you back to your original position, but it would at least heal you. You have the solitude in you that the person who did this is now in jail or has now been convicted. So justice is, you cannot talk about reconciliation and reparations or other things without justice or prosecutions. And I believe that is one thing that we must be ready for. So the government, like any other person is saying and expecting, needs to mobilize more resources because justice is not cheap and it's not easy. It the word might be very familiar and then very easy to use, but it is very difficult to arrive at a just decision or to do justice, especially to crimes that, apart from the Trrc, most of the evidence and then most of these things were concealed and destroyed. So and then the fact that it's a two-way traffic too makes the thing more complex, and most of the time the law is mostly in favor of the accused person in criminal trials, because the threshold is high to prove that crime. You hear people who say beyond reasonable doubt and things like that. So it's not going to be easy, but I believe it's something that we can do. if other nations have done it and it is used today as a precedent, why not the Gambia? Because we have this international and then other relevant stakeholders that are willing to help the Gambia transition and engage in genuine prosecution of people that are really found as perpetrators to the commission of various offenses. So I believe it's going to be tough, but we can do it.
We can do it. Council, victims' expectations, we did talk about that. We've heard from the chairman of the Human Rights Commission, Mr. Bush, and even Fatu as well, did talk about some of these challenges, especially in terms of prosecuting some of these individuals like Jami. I mean, of course, high-profile cases we're talking about, and the challenges like the lack of, resources, the capacity as well. But are we ready?
As of today, we are not. That is why government is seeking international support and expertise, because this is a really, even after this, we maybe several years, even if there ought to be prosecution, especially because these things are complex and difficult. Like I said, I attended a stakeholder discussion 2 weeks ago, in which government engaged several actors and stakeholders, not least victims, and to sort of perhaps inform not the white people because of the limitation of time, but to inform the implementation of whatever the white paper is going to come up with. And I know there are international lawyers with vast experience in these areas. But in terms of victims, see, justice is very relative. So for me, as perhaps a human rights lawyer, ordinarily I expect justice. I want prosecution of those who bear the greatest responsibility. Those who bear the greatest responsibility. But in that context, I think this would be a really difficult and highly sensitive topic. But we have tough choices and decisions to make. So in terms of prosecution, so you have to look at what do the victims actually want, and I have always emphasized this, because if you look at the Western countries and if you've been philosophical about it, if you look at these Western neoliberal approaches to justice, they have a toolkit. So the toolkit normally is violations such as rape, murder, and stuff like that. There must be prosecution because those are their priorities, and for them to give you money, there has to be a certain agreement there with prosecution. But now let's take it further. At this discussion 2 weeks ago, I spoke to a widow. I'm not going to mention. I spoke to a widow of one of those murdered November 11th. Yeah. And the widow, up to this date, is living that victimhood, not in terms of the violations of civil and political rights, but the victimhood is now in relation to her socio-economic rights, because her husband, who was the breadwinner, is killed. In terms of maintaining the family, in terms of housing, there's that difficulty. Yeah. So if you look at somebody like that, taking Yahya Jammeh to The Hague, the Sierra Leone Special Court, $300 million was spent. The complex cost in Freetown cost $3.5 million. 14 people were indicted. And also a judge, foreign judge, because they had this hybrid, was paid $240,000 annually, and that created whatever. So $240,000, that's about, in Gambia, that's about 12 million annually, and that lasted so long. So for example, now for a victim in Sukuta or a victim in Fonyi, who suffered horrendously under Yahya Jammeh, what does justice actually mean for that individual? It's not for you and I to assume what that person want. It is for them to tell us what they want, and what they want is to intimately engage with them and know what they want. So pursuing this neoliberal agenda sometimes may give you technical justice, but not substantive justice, because whatever justice you arrive at may not have any meaningful impact on the daily livelihood of these individuals. And the whole essence is to restore their dignity and the respect that they deserve as human beings.
Interesting discussion.
Yeah, extraordinary there. I mean, in fact, the way they treated justice very much like lawyers. But here I'll give more of a literary understanding from Wole Soyinka, who once said that justice is the first condition of humanity. I think that's what you were bringing it out here, that humanity. And they also tell you that peace is not the absence of violence, it's the presence of justice. So you hear it in all these contexts. So the price, how much they had to pay. But for justice, it's priceless. Absolutely. We will pay anything to get justice. It's utterly, because the whole piece, the whole fabric of my society depends on whether we perceive institutions and the whole society to be just. That is key. And it is the very idea that we don't think things are just. Maybe that is why, as individuals, as citizens, we do what we do. Because we don't think that the structures, the formal structures, are really there for us. You see? We don't see that. Perhaps that's why we do what we do, that break down in trust. So these are the things that you need to build up. And for our future, our children, these things are priceless. We should pay whatever it takes to get justice.
You want to add anything to that?
Yes, I wholly agree with him, because because I am also a member of civil society, so I do a lot of engagement at the community level. It's the same perception that you have victims that will tell you, if really prosecuting Yaya Jammeh would mean I would not be dignified, I would not live a dignified life, then to me it doesn't make sense. What they are saying is it makes sense that he pays for his crime in the state's responsibility to hold people accounted for the laws they violated. But how about the aspect of me giving that dignified life? Because you have people that lost some of their shapes and some of their they lost a lot in them that they need to be on let's say a lifetime treatment for them to be able to survive. You have people that need to be on life support, that is financially and medically. So if you...
All right, so Fatu, I'm afraid we will have to link Aliu now. I'm being informed that Aliu is on the line. They're about to start. Lucky we were actually hoping that it might take a bit longer. But yes, we have Aliu on the line. Aliu? All right, so while we wait to connect with Aliu, Fatu, just quickly.
So I was just saying, let's not overthink that justice is only taking somebody to court and convicting them. It's far beyond that. We need social justice, we need economic justice, and even political justice. So all these things need to be encapsulated in the implementation of the TRRC. So if they think that prosecutions are going to hinder the aspect of raising and then conducting reparations or even compensating victims, then they need to think about it and make sure whatever is done, the victims must be at the center, because they lost a lot. And I believe we owe them that obligation to make sure that they live that dignified life, and they wouldn't be dropouts because their dad was killed. Today they should be able to get to where they wanted to get to. If somebody wanted to be at this level because their father was going to do that for them, when the dad is taken away without their will, then we should be able to get them to that level as much as we can.
All right.
Yes.
So we have Aliu on the line now, I believe. Aliu?
Yes, Ansumana?
Yes, take us up to speed with what is happening now.
Thank you very much, Ansumana. We're still at the Sadauda Kairaba International Conference Center, and we're still waiting for the start of this important event here at the conference center, which is going to be the release of the white paper. But I have before me, I have Sirandao of Aneket and of course John Charles Njai of Tango, a member of the civil society. I would just engage them as to what are their expectations ahead of the release of this white paper. Auntie Sira, I mean, you're live on QTV. What are you expecting from the white paper?
Thank you very much, Aliwe. It's a very historic moment for victims, for Gambians, and really globally having this event going on right now. And my expectations are actually quite high. I expect the ministry to accept pretty much most of the recommendations because we do not think that they are unreasonable. And we think that they would agree with us that it's in the interest of not just the victims, but in the interest of the nation and in the interest particularly of the slogan that the Gambia has adopted, Gambians have adopted for that matter, the never again, where we are not only resolving and rehabilitating and restituting and reconciling, but also making sure that we're future-proofing our country in the sense that we are protecting all citizens and all visitors and anybody who visits the Gambia from harm, really. So I'm very excited. My expectations are high, and we'll see how it goes.
You talk about your expectations being high. What makes your hopes high?
Because like I said, we don't think that the recommendations are unreasonable, and we don't think that they are not doable. There might be some that may need to be tweaked here and there, and our engagement with the ministry, we have agreed that we cannot expect everything to be as is, but there could be alternatives that could be found, and we are talking about long term. Not everything needs to be done now, and if you have the will, you'll find a way.
And in the event it doesn't go your way, what is going to be the next move?
The next move is to engage the government and find out why. The answers would have to be really justifiable. And of course, as the victims community, we know that you cannot get everything. It is not possible, even in the long term. Some things you might have to negotiate and compromise and move on in the interest of, in everybody's interest. So we have that. So in that spirit, I believe that if it doesn't come out as we expect, we can continue the engagement. As long as the government, and people, everybody is willing to really continue the engagement, we can do it. If it doesn't come out, we look at other ways, alternatives, and look at whether also the things that we're looking for may just not be possible this time around. We have seen around the world where recommendations by truth commissions have taken years to implement, and where in some places the government had rejected, and next another executive comes on board and says, hey, now we can do it. And resources are also limited, so some things might be impossible now, but can be possible later. So we will be engaging, and all options will be on the table. But first, engagement.
Well, Ansumana, that is Sirandao, who is the country representative for the African Network Against Extrajudicial Killings and Enforced Disappearance. I also have John Charles Njai here, a member of the Civil Society and chairman of Tango. Many times people talk about reconciliation over justice. What's your take?
Well, I believe the two can go together. For some, justice could be part of the reconciliation process. So we cannot say one before the other. I think the two can go hand in hand. And the nation also needs to heal. We need to move forward. But for some, the reconciliation is even the justice that is meted out is what would bring the reconciliation. The reconciliation coming together, forgiving one another. But I don't think we have to put it in a box that one has to come before the other, because victims are diverse and victims have their individual needs. So it's meeting. Really, for me, what is important is meeting the needs of the victims, because from the onset, it was said that it's going to be a victim-centered TRRC. And thankfully enough, we want to appreciate the efforts of government, that even for the first time, as long as we can remember, that a white paper is being presented, and it was even discussed. A forum was, we had a forum where, different views were taken on board before the finalization of the white paper. And I think that is very, very, very proactive, and it must be commended. And we, like Sarah said, our expectations are high, because for the first time, government has really engaged with different stakeholders, with victims, civil society, different stakeholders, as to moving forward with the TRRC process. And we are appreciative of that fact. And that is what gives us hope. Even you'll see the atmosphere in the hall. There is expectation, there is excitement that, this has never been done before. A white paper has never been launched in this magnitude before. And we are appreciative of that fact. I think as a nation, we must begin to appreciate our little gains and our little wins for us to move forward. But beyond the TRRC white paper coming out today, every Gambian has to come on board. I have been an advocate that every one of us must support the reparation fund, so that we don't just wait for government. Government has a responsibility. I'm not watering that down. But every individual Gambian has a responsibility. Let's see how we can contribute so that victims feel that the Gambian spirit, the Gambian oneness is very strong now.
Thank you very much, John Charles Yai of Tango and Auntie Siranda. Thank you so much for speaking to us here. I mean, and Sumana, yes, I mean, that's exactly what's happening. You've heard from them. Their hopes are quite high. I know now they have to rush back to the hall. I mean, to witness the beginning of the event here. But like I said, and Sumana, I mean, this event is quite significant. I mean, I have seen a high personalities here in this hall. I mean, the government is well represented. I have seen so many government ministers, I mean, members of the National Assembly are here. I have seen the Deputy Speaker himself, Sidin Jai is here, the Chief of Staff, I mean, Motkis is are all in the hall, I mean, just awaiting the release of this white paper. And Sumana, back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you very much, Aliu. I mean, we would be with you shortly again, you know, as we look forward to the start of the event, which I understand would be happening very soon. But just interesting discussions there. What do you make of what they've said? I mean, you have the chairman of Tango and one who is, you know, a victim, but also running a memorial for victims. Mr. Bush.
Yes, I thought they were sound and measured and quite mature about it, knowing that it's going to be a very difficult process. But I'm not surprised there. We've known them for a very long time. So this is the excitement you can see in everybody, the expectations, you know, the expectant faces and the like. So absolutely, yes. Fantastic contributions there to the whole debate, and I love the maturity about it.
So one of the Commission's mandates is to, you know, recommend persons for amnesty. We read in the papers a few weeks ago that Sana Sabali, you know, has been recommended for amnesty by the Commission, and then we had, you know, civil society reacting to it, including the Victims Center. It became a very controversial issue as well. Amnesty.
Well,
yes, you go first.
Go ahead. Okay, so it's always interesting because we would always have controversies around whatever that we do. So I believe the TRRC did it out of reasonability. It's not like they've overlooked what happened. If those things are done, that is their reasonable judgment. And it might be wrong, reasonable in the eyes of others or not, but in the end, the government has the responsibility of looking at this whole thing alongside with the victim's plight and what repercussions would that cost. Because at the end of the day, we said the TRRC needs to be a victim-centered TRRC. In as much as I would say, generally, all of us are victims, because the fact that our rights were violated, that I wouldn't sit in a car or in public to talk about things that I feel are not right in my country, my right was violated. So we were all victims. True. So now the government needs to look at this amnesty in a very, very sensitive way. You might want to grant amnesty to somebody. You might want to not to do it. But again, these are controversies. But at the end of the day, what is important is, if this is done, is it in the best interest of the country? Is it in the best interest of reconciliation? Is it in the best interest of the victims' rights? And is it in the best interest of making sure these things don't happen again? So whatever we are doing, let us not do things that would, at the end of the day, take us back to what we never wanted to take place in the first place.
Well, could it be because he was a victim too? But remember, a perpetrator as well. In the event you have situations like this, it's always very difficult. But then, how about those who would argue that the crime you commit have nothing to do with your victimization? Counsel.
Yeah, the issue of amnesty is always going to be a funny issue. It's always going to be controversial. But see, I think regardless of today's euphoria, difficult days, probably the more difficult days lie ahead. Tough decisions have to be made in any way, because this is not a one day, it's a long process. So, and you have so many different components. So the issue of amnesty is actually included in the TRRC Act. But those who make full disclosure and show remorse for their actions and perhaps may have also participated in a reconciliation process, so far as their violations do not form parts of crimes that are crimes against humanity, may be eligible. So in the TRRC report, you would find that even recommendations, there are aspects of it where recommendations are that certain, not individual, but certain perpetrators who perhaps embraced the TRRC came and testified, and for the most part, or all intents and purposes, were really frank and owning up to what they did. So perhaps such individuals may be eligible, because remember, without these people coming to testify and telling us the truth, some things will remain hidden eternally, so we will never know perhaps the extent of the violations, by whom and how they occurred. So for example, Sana Sabali, probably the most high profile, it's a controversial one, because one, November 11th, Sana was the sort of like the man on the ground, and he admitted to executing in cold blood, and this was pursuant to a policy that they agreed. That's why Jammeh said, execute the ringleaders. But at the same time as well, he was only in power for a relatively short period.
6 months.
Afterwards, he himself was unlawfully arrested, unlawfully prosecuted, and unlawfully convicted and sentenced. During that period, he was
tortured as well.
Tortured, yeah. So several forms of torture, physical, sexual based, and several others. So if you look at, so somebody like Sana Sabali, it really presents a really complex and complicated, because he is a perpetrator of the highest order, but at the same time, he's also
a victim.
A victim by all accounts, and suffered terribly. So what does the TRRC do now? But remember, prosecutions, reparations, all these are different components. We also have the issue of reconciliation, but also inbuilt into the process is this idea that, and for people like Sana Sabali and the others who came and were honest and told the truth and apologized and were remorseful, they would have this legitimate expectation that so far as their crimes do not fall part of crimes against humanity, that they may perhaps be eligible for amnesty, because otherwise they may have been that incentive for them to come and own up and make full disclosure. But because of the high profile nature of Sana Sabali, perhaps that is always going to be. So granted amnesty, victims and others will say, when you do that, in a way you're sending a message that you are condoning impunity in a way. But there are others on the other spectrum of the argument who may also say, this guy should never revisit prisons again, should never be whatever, because his victimhood kind of overrides his actions as a perpetrator. But I believe but this is technical, this is complicated, because remember, somebody.
So I'm being notified that we have to link with Aliu that they are starting the event now. Thankfully, the wait is over.
Inclusive process. Following this consultative process, which the government spokesperson has extensively outlined in his earlier statement, I am glad to say we now have a white paper. The white paper represents government's position on the recommendations of the TRRC, as well as our proposed implementation plan. I am proud to say this white paper is unprecedented in its scope and content. Out of 265 recommendations made by the Commission the government made only 2 outright rejections, leaving the rest of the recommendations earmarked for implementation in one form or another. An acceptance rate of over 95% or more, all recommendation is unprecedented in the history of truth commissions. And I am convinced that we now have a clear roadmap towards reconciliation, justice, reparation, and ensuring non-recurrence. The Trrc report, by and large, sets out in much detail an accurate historical record of the violations and human rights abuses that took place under the government of former President Yahya Jammeh. We must, however, admit that the sum of the conditions that made it possible for these atrocities to be committed still exist. This truth-seeking process will therefore be futile if we do not put in place long overdue comprehensive legislative and institutional reforms. The implementation of the Trrc's recommendation is therefore anchored on a broad-based reform which are at the center of the white paper. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, during this review, it has come clear that sexual and gender-based violence, SGV, was a recurring theme in human rights abuses and violations committed between 1994 and 2017. The government lays special emphasis on the Trrc's recommendations on SGBV and recognizes that SGBV was and continues to be widely prevalent in the Gambia. The government further notes that many acts that constitute SGBV are not seen as a violation due to the patriarchal nature of society, which accepts discrimination against women and girls and shames victims of SGBV into silence. The government is therefore committed to investing more on research, education, sensitization, and outreach and training, behavioral change, and psychosocial support to address SGBV, particularly for vulnerable communities. Of particular concern to government is the alarming number of enforced disappearances that occurred under the direction of the former President Jammeh and the continued suffering of the families who up till this day are unaware of the whereabouts of their loved ones or their remains. The government is committed to working with key partners in finding the bodies of victims of enforced disappearances and bringing closer to their families. There is no doubt that the country has gone through a very traumatic experience and is in dire need of individual and collective healing as well as reconciliation, not just with the perpetrators of these human rights violations, but with our past as a nation. We must forge ahead to build a strong and resilient society, and to do so quickly. Hence, we cannot continue to dwell on the past. I must, however, hasten to add that reconciliation must be balanced with the need to ensure accountability, and that perpetrators who bear the greatest responsibility for human rights abuses are to face justice and answer for their crimes. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the government takes cognizance of the fact that reparations are a central part of the reconciliation process and is committed to ensuring life-transforming reparations are provided to victims of these human rights violations. While there is a tendency to always equate reparation to monetary compensation, I am of the view that for reparations to be effective, it must, in addition to monetary compensation, extend to physical rehabilitation, restoration of civil and political rights, and the provision of education and health care for victims. The government has previously made available $50 million into the Trrc for payment of interim reparation, and has earmarked over $150 million in this year's budget for reparations. The government shall continue to work towards mobilizing additional financial resources for this process. It is important to note that despite the comprehensive nature of the TRRC process, it is likely that not all victims of human rights violations under the previous government has been identified. The Ministry of Justice, in close consultation with the victims, is working on a victims' bill to explore the best avenue for addressing the issue of reparations. My ministry will continue to work towards putting in place independent structures for the continuous evaluation and identification of victims and to administer a reparation scheme. We are gathered today full of hope for a better tomorrow. Today, however, is also a somber reminder of the traumatic event that occurred between 1994 and 2017. We must therefore not forget many victims of these violations, especially those who lost their lives. Bearing that in mind, I am pleased to announce His Excellency the President's decision and that of his government to rename the 22nd Arch to Never Again Memorial Arch. In honor of the victims of gross human rights abuses and violations under the regime of the former President Jammeh. The government plans to renovate the arch and erect a plaque with the names of victims of Jammeh regime. It is our hope that this memorial may be repurposed as a fitting reminder that never again shall we allow such heinous abuses and violations in our beloved country. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, the release of the white paper today is by no means the end of this process, but the beginning of the most important phase, which is the implementation. Irrespective of your stance, whether as a government, political party, CSO, media organization, or victim-led organization, we are all stakeholders in this process, and as such must work together in ensuring an effective and successful implementation of the recommendations. The slogan "Never Again" summarizes our dreams and aspirations for the future, but we must ensure that it does not only remain as a slogan, but it's translated into concrete action. The implementation will therefore be transparent and inclusive with clear timelines and measurable outcomes. Rest assured that government is fully committed to implementation of, as outlined in the white paper. We have been given a unique opportunity to change the trajectory of our dear nation, and posterity will judge us by our actions. Now that we have the white paper, it is important that implementation begins in earnest. We recognize that the integrity of the implementation process is anchored on the men and women in the driving process. In that light, we note that certain individuals who had been adversely mentioned by the Commission continue to serve in various areas of public and security services. The government shall take steps for their immediate suspension from service, while we work on lawful means to effect their dismissal, termination, compulsory retirement as each case may require. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as earlier mentioned, the government places greater importance on justice and accountability for human rights violations committed during the regime of ex-President Yahya Jammeh. However, effectively investigating and prosecuting international crimes such as torture, mass murder, and enforced disappearances is complex, and it requires specialist expertise, which our domestic institutions, which do not ordinarily deal with such cases and must also manage their normal domestic caseload, do not have the capacity or experience to undertake. It is therefore preferable to establish separate specialist accountability structures that can be annexed to or embedded into the domestic legal system and mandated to perform those functions through the effective use of relevant advocates, investigators, appropriate experts, and skilled support staff. In this regard, it is in this regard that I will be setting up a special prosecution division under my office to be headed by a special prosecutor. This division will have investigative and prosecutorial authority over all offenses recommended for prosecution by the TRRC. In the same vein, the government intends to create a special judicial framework within our domestic court system for the prosecution of perpetrators. The courts shall be located within the Gambia with the option of holding sittings in other jurisdictions based on the exigencies of each case. This option balances the need to prioritize local ownership and victim participation with security concerns and witness protection requirements. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I must at this point express our gratitude to all our partners and actors who have aided in making this process a success. I wish to thank most especially our political party leaders for the key role you have played throughout the transitional justice process, and hope we can continue to count on your support as we move towards the implementation stage. Leaders of all political parties will receive their complimentary copies of the white paper today. I also wish to thank all our partners, multilateral and bilateral, who have supported us and continue to support us through this process, especially the United Nations Peacebuilding Fund for the support throughout the transitional justice process, and the American Bar Association, who are the implementing arm of the USAID project, whose support has been crucial in the timely delivery of this white paper. On behalf of government and the people of the Gambia, I would like to thank the chairman and commissioners, as well as staff of the TRRC, for their invaluable service rendered to the nation. We cannot forget also to thank all witnesses who cooperated with the TRRC and the entire citizenry at large for yet again doing it our Gambian way. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this government understands that the duty of the state to investigate and bring to justice the perpetrators of gross human rights violations is the duty that it owes not only towards victims, but also towards society as a whole. Impunity is a kind of incentive that we are not prepared to serve perpetrators. Let us be clear about this. Those who contemplate committing gross human rights violations must also have no doubt that one day society would hold them accountable for their actions. Their resolve to commit these atrocities cannot be stronger than our collective will as a society to hold them to account. Notwithstanding, it is our desire to create an environment based on holding perpetrators accountable through proceedings based on the highest national and international standards of due process, where right to fair and speedy trial before a competent impartial body will be guaranteed. In conclusion, therefore, I wish to reiterate government's unwavering commitment to the implementation of the TRRC report as set out in this white paper, with a view to ensuring reconciliation and national healing, accountability and justice for the victims of gross human rights abuses and violations, the provisions of reparation for victims, broad institutional reforms, and ensuring non-recurrence. On that note, thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that speech. You will note we have the copies of the white paper available. The white paper contains 173 pages. It has 600 paragraphs, and it contains 265 recommendations. The white paper is structured according to the 17 thematic areas that were released by the TRC and contains supplementary chapters on reparations, reconciliation, memorialization, and amnesty. Without further ado, we'll proceed to distribute certain copies. I'd like to call a representative of the victims, given the importance that the government attaches to this process. The Honorable Attorney General hand over complimentary copies on behalf of the victims. Aisatu Kani.
Well, that is the Attorney General there. I mean, handing out copies of government's TRRC white paper to some of the victims or family members of victims. Powerful message there. We missed out on that of the government spokesperson, but I want to believe it's more or less the same. 265 recommendations, only 2 rejected. Mr. Much?
Yes, absolutely. And in the speech, the delivery, the tone of it, there appears to be purpose, commitment. So I heard a similar thing during the swearing in of the new ministers, when the president said, hey, look, I'm appointing you at a time when our institutions need leadership. I think, and the minister today also talked about the institutional reform aspects. So it appears as if government is really beginning to understand really the scale of the problem, the institutional reforms that we need to make for things to go right. So I was heartened, as it were, by what I heard from him, I have to say, yes. Really.
Yes, I believe we share the same emotions or perception. I got emotional at what point, you know, when the Honorable Minister and Attorney General was speaking on, you know, expectations of Gambians, and really we are glad that at least from his speech you can see the commitment, and again the fact that they only rejected 2 out of all these recommendations is commendable, and then that, I believe, it's one step ahead of what we have. So the commitment is there, as stated by the Attorney General, that the government is fully committed to the implementation, and in fact he even went further to tell us how some of these things would be done, like the creation of special division or criminal division at the Ministry of Justice to ensure that these things are fully taken care of by Gambians, because we don't want a TRRC, post-TRRC, that would be hijacked by foreign intervention to an extent that Gambians would feel it is not something that was started by them, and it is not something that has to be ended by them. Congratulations to the Gambia as well.
Country?
Yeah. Unprecedented. The same thing I have to, really, really unprecedented. I think we couldn't have wished for more, in all fairness. I think on paper, based on today's actions, I think there is purpose and a really strong sense of commitment to implement. Again, not to be a party spoiler, it is one thing to produce these documents and sort of really the beautiful choreography. The real work, as the minister said, begins today. This is going to be long and complex and painful sometimes. So whether government will continue to have the same level of political commitment, because you can say all of this and still slightly drag your feet. But that's for another day. But today, I you know, personally, I am really impressed. It looks like government is showing real commitment to this stuff.
So, I mean, as you can see on your screens, that is the Attorney General and Minister of Justice distributing copies of government's white paper on the TRC findings to victims, family members of victims, as well as members of the diplomatic corps, and of course political party leaders as well. And talking about commitment, Council, there, one of the things he said that really struck me is the renaming of the arch to Never Again Memorial Arch, its renovation, as well as I mean, plans to renovate it and erect a plaque, and with names, I mean, bearing names of victims. Bold step.
Absolutely. For me, the symbolic significance of it. You see, what was it called? July 20 Arch?
Yes.
July,
Revolution.
That's it. So, Arch 22.
Yes.
So, it was supposed to represent a certain triumphalism.
Yeah.
So, in the end, it turned out to be an edifice of your shame. Extraordinary journey. That's really, in the end, that's what happened. So, I love that touch, as it were. It's a fantastic
yeah, so we did talk about, you know, we gave examples of Sanasabali and the Amnesty thing we talked about earlier. So out of these 265, only 2 recommendations rejected, as mentioned by the Honorable Minister. I want to believe one of them would be that of Sanasabali. I'm looking at the white paper now, and the first thing you see at the top is, you know, recommendation for the prosecution of the former vice president, followed by that of Sanasabali, whose amnesty recommendation has been rejected by government. Of course, they did admit in the white paper that yes, he came voluntarily, he made full disclosure, he, you know, admitted to committing, you know, all these crimes, he showed remorse, yet he bears responsibility for gross human rights violations. And this is in relation to the extrajudicial killing of November 11, I mean, during November incident of the killing of 11 soldiers, or 11/11 as we call it. Quite extraordinary. Who would come first? You go first, Pat.
Well, this is really great, and I think their rejections might not be even substantial. So if we are familiar with some of the recommendations given by the TRRC, so it looks like government actually agreed to like 95% or so with the recommendations, and this is what most of the victim-centered organizations were advocating for, because as members of civil society, there is a white paper that was submitted to the Attorney General for consideration in preparation of the government's white paper, and then most of the contents of this CSO paper was to make sure government doesn't disregard totally or substantially the recommendations of the TRRC, because Sirandau said something like that, the expectations are high and then the TRRC recommendations are reasonable. So those expectations today are things that we can say are met. So in there, victims like Sira and then other people would now say at least our expectations as to the government's white paper, vice versa, the TRC recommendations are met. So the next is what next. We have seen some of these actions that the Attorney General said that they're going to start the suspension of active serving members that were perpetrators. I think that is a bold step. So the fact that you have to suspend somebody that was tainted to allow them to go through due process is commendable. And we have to thank the government and also all stakeholders in making sure that these things are done. Honestly, I would say that at one point in history, when the current president went into an alliance with the APRC, you know, a lot of things were happening, like victims and then activists were all over the place that, you know, this cannot happen, this cannot happen. But then one thing that I said and I always stood by was the fact that, okay, for me, in as much as it was under APRC, then a different name, but the same ruling party, But again, that shouldn't mean they cannot do what we want. You know, it has to be us standing our grounds and making sure that government goes by what we want. So then it's one thing that you could expect something. A lot of people might be disappointed today or be surprised that even though that alliance was there, because what the alliance was tainted was that it's going to make sure that this TRC was going to be trust, because of we had statements from people that were part of the APRC and now in the current government. But then it shows that the government is independent enough and it is a people-centered. It's democratic because it's listening to the cries and then to the needs of the people that puts it in power. So that is a milestone in the history of Gambia, holding its leadership and then individuals in authority to account. So it's a great step and really.
All right, Council, just in a minute before we switch to the local language as well, to have you say a word or two, you know, regarding some of this, you know, steps that government intends to take, like with the prosecutions. I said, I say the Sana Sabali's amnesty being rejected.
No, absolutely. I think this is probably more than what the victims actually even wished for. It's really extraordinary. But for somebody like Sana Sabali, okay, the rejection of Sabali's amnesty doesn't mean that he will probably go back to prison or something like, because we have to remember, if ultimately you may want to prosecute Yahya Jammeh, it's unlikely that Yahya Jammeh will be prosecuted in this country, because that's what because from what the minister was, the Honorable Attorney General was saying, this is significantly modeled on the special court for Sierra Leone kind of thing, where it is a hybrid system, you know, locally based, for the other people, but for Charles Taylor, because of the risk that he presents, he was an arrangement made that he was prosecuted at the Hague. So for somebody like Sana Sabali, perhaps, if ultimately the aim is to get somebody like Jammeh to be successfully prosecuted, there may be some form of an arranged immunity that may be explored, and the TRRC envisaged something like it. What may also occur, somebody like Sana Sabali may be charged with manslaughter, a plea deal where he may go back to prison for a very limited period, where at least there is justice on paper. Or something, but it's unlikely that Sana Sabali will be prosecuted for murder and go for life imprisonment. Again, for some of the junglers, somebody like Omar Oya Jallow and somebody like Malik Jatta, who will be instrumental in testifying for the state against their former colleagues, against Yahya Jammeh. So for people like those, if you charge them with murder, obviously then you remove the incentive to cooperate. So yes, people like it, you know, the middle amnesties now, but there'll be some forms of arrangements with the state. But everything that the minister has said here, in terms of Special Prosecution Division, the MOJ, the special judicial framework. So it looks like we said earlier, that at the moment the torture bill is before the National Assembly, international crimes bill is before the National Assembly, and some international crimes haven't also been domesticated. But from what he was saying here, I believe this will be that special court hybrid system where we may have international lawyers and international judges, as well as domestic as well, and international expertise as well, as so that the whole process is close to the victim. So that again enhances the victim-centered approach, so that when it all wraps up, at least it would have enhanced our expertise in this area and our institutions as well. But overall, really extraordinary in a good way.
Yes, even a victim's bill.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Mbodj, nguur tey génn na wone boppam ci liggéey bi nga xam ne la TRC doon def, bokk na si liñ leen sasoon mooy National Assembly bi si jamono bi ñoo create commission bi, mooy ne benn dinañ gestu taarix yi nit ñi nga xamante dañu xëttoon seen àq ci réew mi, waaye tamit dinañ jox ndampaay ñi nga xamante ne ñooy victimes yi, képp koo xam ne tamit yow war nañ la am la yóbbu fa mbaxana doonee benn kooku tamit ñoom commission bi war naa mun a def recommendation si loolu ne diw de foog nañ ne war naa mun a dem, war nañ ko mun a yóbbu ci kanami loi ci ñaawteef bi nga xam ne la def am tamit ci li nga xamante ne sas nañ leen ko mooy jox nit ki amnesty ne diw de naam ne digga la def na ab ñaawteef waaye ci kaw condition bi war nañ ko war a mun a xëy na du jégal sax waaye xëy na luñ koo daan du mel noonu dégg nañ wax bi nga xam ne la kii di ministre bi wax di ministre biñ dénk wàllum àtte ak yoon ci réew mi wane nañ daal nguur TRRC jox na leen lu toll ci 200 juróom-benn fukk ak juróomi recommendations maanaam yeete ci biir yooyu ñaar rek la nguur bi dàq lu ci des yëpp am nañ éene bi pour gis ne doxal nañ ko comme ni ko TRRC recommandé la nguur lan nga jàngat ci lii.
waaw xam nga ñun yàgg nañoo xaar lii quite interesting eso yaa ngi wax foofu yaa ngi làkk olof de olof laa ma ne waaw ki la ngi sound so bombastic.
Wow.
So this is it. Gis nga before you release the white paper. ku ne kaa ngi doon xalaat nan la xew. nan la government di def. ne gis nañ ci élection si dafa xala meloon ni ki Barrow dafa jegeñ APRC. dégg nga parti gi so ñëpp a ngi waaru ne waaw lii lanay xew waaye tey biñ déggee ministre gi foog naa xel gi bari dina dal. ndig wone na commitment wax nañ ñu ne xam nga already ñu ngi fa amoon 50 million you say that in Wolof. waaye léegi dinañ fa def 150 dinañ add more. gis nañ waaw
juróom fukki million la woon. te finance moom mu ne fàttaliku maa ngi fàttaliku am na benn time boo xam ne TRRC bi sax wane woon nañ ne luñ doon séentu mooy around 200. mooy ñaari téeméeri million. yàlla def na nag juróom fukk lañ amoon ci jamono bu ñoo liggéey. léegi nag ministre bi wax na de nguur am na yéene pour yokka ci téeméer ak juróom fukka mu mel ni yéene bi mut na fi mu ne.
so xaalis gi def na fa nekk. ba pare te
boobu mooy ndampaay bi
ndampaay gi su ñiidee pour jëli moo wéy gat moo ba pare ci ministre gi foofu def na fa special body boo xam ne dafa responsible pour loolu so yaa ngi put in these institutional mechanisms pour ñu mun a implement you see ba pare wal nañ ñu respect throughout gis nañ di purpose gis nañ di respect ne dëgg-dëgg bugga nañoo heal xam nga lan laa jël pour ñu heal mais yii yëpp lañ war a def pour ñu heal so loolu laa ci jëlee so wonderful foog naa ne ñu bëri dinañ breathe a sigh of relief ñu xaar nag what next naka la action si di mel
xaar ma dugal Fatou léegi bokk na ci li ministre bi wax mooy aaj bi dañ ko bugg a génnee tur bi nga xam ne lañ ko xamee mu di Arch 22 daal di ko ooyee Never Again Memorial Arch maanaam ñaawte bi nga xam ne moo fi doon am du fi amaat te dañ koo jagleel ñi nga xamante ne ñooy victimes yi wax na tamit de dinañ defaraat aaj bi ba mu gën a rafet waaye tamit am liñ fa sampa loo xam ne dina tax victimes yi ñu gis ci seen bopp ndax képp koo xam ne yàlla def na nga nekk victime wala nga génn àdduna ci loxo nguur bi fi nekkoon sa tur dina fa nekk pour nga xam ne du mos a réer bokk na tamit ci li nga xam ne wax na ko mooy ñii nekk di liggéey ci nguur wala yor ay place ci biir nguur gi ci jamono jiñ ne te ñu tudda leen bu baax ci commission bi adversely mention nguur fas yéene na te pare na pour jël jéego gis ne ñooñu dina leen génne ci liggéey ñu nekkee te lépp loo xam ne moo ci war dinañ ko def lan nga jàngat ci wax bi nga xam ne la kii di ministre bi wax.
waaw loolu kañ lu jara waxtaanee la. thank you so much jërëjëf. léegi moom dinaa try ma laaka olof bu baax. comme ba joomal kii nii Mr Mbodj. waaw lii dafa nekk loo xam ne foog naa mbégte la si Gambian si ak ñoo xam ne ñoom la former président bi naxaral ba nga xam ne ñoom fu mu nekk nii luy faj seen naxar bi rek la ñoo ut. because suñu waree jël aaj boo xam ne lum ñu jàngal rek mooy ne buñ ko doon sampa yaa ngee bàkku ne lii suma liggéey bu rafet laa ko jëlee pour nit yi dugga si Gambia ku gis aaj bi dafa wax ne lii suma liggéey la révolution dama jëlee ko Gambia foo xam ne amuñ dara wala lu bëri mu doon dox si lu ñaaw.
dafa mel ni lu Mr Mbodj waxoon si anglais mu nekk lu doy waar.
waaw lu doy waar tey
biñ ko sampa
waaw
pour dañ ko defoon
dañ ko doon xajaane
pour xajaane wane aussi tey dañ ko xool xel dem si ñaawteef yi nga xam ne moo fi am.
exactly so tey da ngaa gis ne tey loolu noonu li nga sampoon di ko xajaane di si kontaan tey dañ ko seetee ne lii ñaawte la woon loo xam ne dafa xewoon waaye loolu dafa baax because aj 22nd bi ñu ngi ko sampoon ak loo xamante ne mooy depuis 1994 ba Yaya Jammeh waxtoom bu mu jeexee aj bi si la signify so tey nag so yu xewoon tamit ak ñaawte yu fi xew yépp si diggante boobu la xew so aj boobu dafa nekk loo xam ne tey Gambia war naa am loo xam ne soo duggee Gambia rek di nga gis lu 22nd years mooy ñaar fukki at yoo xam ne naxar la woon si Gambia ku fi dugga rek boo xoolee loolu di nga xam ne Gambian si tamit am na loo xam ne naxari na leen woon so loolu dafa baax because lu mel noonu mu ngi Rwanda de am nañ seen genocide memorial bi so ñun tamit am nañ loo xam ne mooy never again soo fi duggee rek di nga xam ne lan moo fi xewoon ba ñu ne waat never again so da ngaa gis ne boo fa duggee di nga jànga history te suñ doom yi suñ ñooñu tam seen generations lu noo ooyee suñ doom ak seen doom di ku fi juddu Gambia di nga xam lu xewoon fii so dafa mel ni loolu dina fa nekka nit yi dinañ fa dem excursion te nit yi dinañ ko jànga ñu xam ne lii de moo fi xewoon te léegi warul fa xew so history boobu noonu di deñ waaw dafa continuer te lii dina nekk loo xam ne dañ see jànge te yaa ngi doon laajte tamit si lu nguur bi wax ne dina génnee ñoo xam ne ñu ngi si biir nguur bi di liggéey te bokkoon nañ si ñoo xam ne ñoom tamit bokkoon nañ si waaw loolu dafa baax so luñ doon wax si angale rek mooy government bi wone na ne ñoom parewuñ pour wax rek ne dinañ def lii dinañ def la waaye pare nañ pour def ko fuñ ko dooree mooy tamit dinañ génnee ñoo xam ne dañ leen tuddoon ne def nañ lu ñaaw si dëkk bi c'est suñ leen génnee tamit dinañ leen teg ba ñu gis ne lii lañ leen mun a doyee ak lii lañ leen war a defee.
ministre bi mu ne lii di gaa dañ ko def immediately maanaam si nu mu gën a gaawee.
xam naa loolu lañ doon ñëpp doon séentu. so di fact that dem nañ ba am xel boobu am xalaat bi ba pare bugg a koo def ñëpp nañ si jàppa ñu xam ne lii loo xam ne la dañ koo def pour suñ nguur du yëfi politique. du yëfi tribe du yëfi religion lii dafa nekk loo xam ne yëfi Gambia la tey soo génnoon biir Gambia lu laa unite ak sa moromi Gambia mooy ne yéen yëpp Gambian ngeen duñ seet leneen soo nañ jàppalante rek ñu make sure ne government bi tamit luñ bugg a def ñu yombalal leen ko xam nga suñ buggee def dara waaye ñun tamit dañ soxla nguur dañ soxla ñëpp waaye ñun suñ bañee rek du dem soo ñun ñëpp dañ si war a ànd nag ñu dimbale leen ñu make sure ne luñ doon séentu yëpp ñu am ko
true council gis nañ ministre bi tamit wane na te mu tam si government white paper bi maa ngi ko doon jàng si gannaaw ci angale ne lépp loo xam ne tuuma la buñ teg si kaw Yaya Jammeh ne dañ ko war a yóbbu ci kanami loi nguuri Gambia nangu na ko te fas yéene naa gis ne lépp luñ ko munti tuumal dinañ ko yóbbu ci kanami loi atte ko beneen bi tamit mooy ne kii di former vice président bi nekkoon bakkandiku Yaya Jammeh di Aïssatou Njie Seydi moom itamit dañ ko war a àtte ndax tuumal nañ ko ne loxoom nekk na ci xale yi nga xamante ne mooy ndongo daara yi nga xamante ne ñu ngi leen faatoon ci jamono bi nga xam ne ñu ngi doon dox ñaxtu ci atum 2000 mu di student protest bi moom itamit tuumal nañ ko loolu te nguur nangu na ne dañ ko war a yóbbu ci kanami loi kenn ki nga xam ne tamit moom victime la waaye tam perpetrator la te ñëwoon na si commission bi di Sana Sabally commission bi ñu yee doon nguur ne waroon nañ ko mun a xëj na jégal wala seet ni ñoo def ak moom fi mu ne nguur dafa daaxlu boobu la recommendation ne moom tamit war nañ ko war a mën a yóbbu ci kanami loi ndax moom i tamit am na loxo ci soldaar yi nga xam ne ñu ngi leen faatoon ci weeru novembre fukki fan ak benn mu nekkoon fukki benn soldaar yi nga xamante ne ñu ngi faatoon seen bakkan fii ci biir réew mi ñu ngeen ko xamee ci 11/11 mu di novembre 11 naka nga jàngatee lii tamit.
maa ngi jégalu di ñaan tam ndax mun naa tuntu loolu si soose.
si soose waaw mun naa yow si man
waaw xam nga déglukat yi mën a no problème waxtaan bu am solo la. so bi lungo kumata bakere bari miyem be bende jen ka kacha wolong bari mobe yal ne ko tiara manja kunda tiara si londi lenu pour ka kisi ro ke min kata halamba dingol la nyantol de minti nyata ya jemmela maralo jamano so wo report o nying paletal nung yadi banko nyaton kola november karo serum so kayto min finte be kamin for government white paper wolom mansa kundala lodula lonya katawo tiara si report kan minister attorney general min marsalwa bunda la ako TRC recommendation mimu keme fula tang woronin lulu fula damay balanta walla so wala nyinte kon safo ko nimba haymela kemola min tara sidla tang kononto anin lulu o min siata woti masakunda sonto belale so nimmi ya jibe wala nyinte kon safo ko almost TRC mimbe landi ko sartol koy lafa masakunda ya betale womu ko kende balti mi yalon ko fanan sewo ku balon balin sinadum ya tandi fanan ko milbe yalon ko ye luwal tiñanum wo jamano la TRC recommended pour que samba kitiola e bo kala wala na ya foko ala atela department to ministry of justice mim marta luwala abi ababunda yela la jël mim marla pour que kisi ke pour ka mol samba kitiola mi yalon ko tellen tilimbal ya kenung ani manya jawol wo jamano aya tindi fanan ko special judicial framework wolon ka bunda le mba marla kiti ko luwanin kiti wala fanala mimba makoro kala pour ka nyunkol sembento ya bitala nyamen pour ka mol kitindi mini manya jawol ke sana sabali tiara si ye Amnesty dialal no mosa min folde ko TRC recommendation kala ko wom multi mialon ko anya musakunda nyanta yam falayele to mandoto bari sana sabal multi mialon ko afona da TRC da akole ko November 11 anin kata prison September 6 1994 ay manual kel nung afon son tel ko itel
ya tumi munna asonta biral
so mosa mirano ko wodo bari mo son tamen nakay mom wodo mari nyanta sambala kitiola but mandoto bari ate fana multi mialon ko ala nyantol ye wolti nyale ka sorong amankuke so bal TRC bal manzakunda manson TRC la recommendation nyina so wala ñinde ko man saba blola la kan bala be kala ñami mo mawlon folo
kansul milito ko danke yen so do monde nga aliou fanan dundi bos na kalam ta ko afana be la no tole aliou hello aliou
as you have been following, we have just had the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Govt. Jalor, release the white paper. I mean, you can hear, I mean, there was a cheer from the crowd who were in the hall as the minister did a highlight of the government stance on the recommendations made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Well, I have with me the chairman of the Gambia's National Human Rights Commission, Emmanuel Govt. Earlier on, we spoke with him before the release, and he was quite hopeful of a very good white paper. Mr. Govt, what's your take on the report?
Well, as you know, it has just come out, but just perusing, I've been giving a copy, and of course, from the speech of the Honorable Minister, it appears that most of what people expected, the stakeholders, the government has met it. We're going now to the implementation phase. Issues relating to prosecution of those who bear the greatest responsibility has been addressed, and they'll be prosecuted. Yaya Jammeh and his team will be prosecuted. What is also key is those that have been recommended not to hold public offices. You heard the Honorable Minister say that immediately, with immediate effect, they will be suspended and investigation will go on. Issues of reparations was also made. And what I want, and what we really were in love with, is the emphasis on impunity. If we're going to have the never again mantra making any sense, if we're going to move this country to a better society where rule of law, human rights is respected and protected, never again. And this is what the minister emphasized. Institutions that work, reform of the laws to make sure that human rights, the rule of law is respected and protected, so that what happened before will not happen again. But if you look at it, is a bold move. Most of the recommendations were accepted, and this is what the victims are also very happy about the outcome. there was a lot of suspicion. There were a lot of naysayers. People felt that this was just going to be one of those things that will come to pass. But listening to the Honorable Minister today, it seems that the government is serious to make sure that the never again has a meaning. And then we now move on to the implementation phase, which the National Human Rights Commission will monitor and will report back to the public and the National Assembly. But I think this was great. People are happy, you can tell, from the victims, from the stakeholders, what we heard today, and taking a perusal of what the recommendations are, the government accepting it in the white paper has actually, I think, move us into another level. It shows that Gambia is serious. We are serious about what happened. We are serious about our past, and we're serious about our future. And that's all I want to say. So let's keep the fire burning.
What do you make of the idea of renaming the Arch 22 to Never Again Memorial Arch?
Yes, we've talked about memorialization. You remember, it was an issue. Today, I think what the Honorable Minister said, he was singing to the choir, as so to speak. He was singing to the choir. Changing Arch 22 to, and having even a placard of all the victims of those who suffered on the 22 years of Jammeh, it's fantastic. This is what people were talking about. This is, you cannot have reconciliation if you can't have justice. We can't just talk about reconciliation without talking about justice. And this is what we have been saying. This is a gesture that you heard when he said it. People clapped. This is what they wanted. Let us own up that we had a history, a checkered history, and never again shall we allow this country, this beautiful country, to go back to what happened.
And I've gone through the report briefly, and I've seen, one of the recommendations made by the Commission was to grant amnesty to Sana Sabally, which the government has rejected outright. It's one of the few that the government has rejected.
Yes, you will see it says it noted, but it also rejected, because you cannot also grant amnesty to certain crimes. You cannot. And I think it was also a bone of contention. If you've been reading over the last couple of weeks, people were actually very angry about this amnesty that was that was recommended. And the government, again, that's what I said, the government means business. It says, listen, we cannot condone amnesty to those people who have committed these heinous crimes. And again, the minister today was speaking to the choir. This is what people wanted to hear. And so far, so good. Let's now move to the implementation stage to make sure that it becomes a reality.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Jove, the chairman of the Gambia's National Human Rights Commission, here talking to us shortly after having the white paper on the Trrc recommendation released by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Govt. Mr. Jove, thank you so much for your time. We quite appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Mr. Jove. Well, Ansumana, that's what's been happening here. That was the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, Emmanuel Jove, just taking us through his take on the highlights of the white paper, just made few minutes ago by the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Aliu. We appreciate that. My colleague Aliu Cisse there, speaking to Chairman of the Human Rights Commission. Council, before me Aliu Dundiladong, you were talking about the minister's statement. Adalbe call kona melfo kolam ka ajo nyin to faling aning fana mol me yalla ko be do ko la man sakunda kono ye tumi ko ye loi tinya ko man sakunda be abe bayra do ko la barani batal ning silol la aning fana ni recommendation ol jibe fuladama man sakunda balanta wala adalbe wol kono wolem Sana Sabally la amnesty ko la fana
no I think about kele mulmi yalonko because mo jama bi yele min yalonko Trrc ito nota report ko ko nyimo molti mi yalonko ye hadamadi mol lanyanto tinyale o nyimo molti mi yalonko mo jama be kono mollo mi yalonko be do ko non loi bundalla loi nin tanko bundalla aida police o NIA o Sojaro Kundaro. So one more sifal mini along ko tiara mol natne ka testify tiara ka itendi ko yela nyantol tinyale Trrc recommend ko mo molati mi along ko bari manyal le ke manya jawul mi along ko nimmo sifal manyana kontina ka do ko ka mansaye. So modol bi jel mi along ko mo to framanse long so pour mansaye sombi ka foko immediately kabobila iba wol
sindlal tarin ke fo janning ibena decisional tamin be kala permanent puruka ibe bala do ko nyaming o be fonyon la nyaming o badol force to retail nyaming so wokum mata bakel because abaming itanilla victims wala ning Gambia dingol o molmi yalon ko wade ko sandama fula soda ko wala nyinde ko mon sekunda yi yandle ko ibe serious rin TRRC ko wala ibe serious ne pour kany recommendation ol ning ka implement arch 22 ni la faming falin na saying ka ko memorial arch wala nyinde ko ka ka molming victims ol ke toke fonko bala placard bala ka keje pour wate wat ni mbe tambe kanjela nga remember ko nyimudla dami alon kon sa hakilo murndi ko maka pour ka tinde ko man sakunda manyina mola min yalon ko wolle wolle tilimbal ya no jamane jawola so wolbe mu ko ma ballati bari abe minute don wolon man sakunda ba tande kam mola le ko TRRC la doko kele ya banne report o dita la sign so min to daje sign wolon pour man sa ya tande gamen ding wala mi be bantala bankol kan ko la nyinde ko man sakunda serious tale ñin do wala anin ka halama ding wala nyanto fasa bake.
All right, let me engage Mr. Mboj again. The minister said we may have, the commission may have completed its work and government have taken decisions as to what to do next with the commission's findings, but then there is more work to do. We're moving on to the most important stage now, which is the implementation of these recommendations.
Absolutely. I mean, you see, he's already mentioned, for instance, the special investigative team that's going to be established, and there would be a successor body to the TRRC that would be responsible for reparations. So, first things first, get the mechanisms in place. that shows that you are serious, so that they can set to work immediately then to implement. So that is it. So far, we've been hearing the right words. It appears as if they've got the right intentions. But this is it. It's quite a journey from intention to actuality. It's quite a journey. So this is it. But once we all sign up to it, it seems that most of us, we are quite heartened by it. Perhaps it makes it easier. That ownership, and we will fight for it. So we've rallied the whole country, as it were, towards the realization of certain goals. So it helps once everybody comes on board and we are together. That united we stand and we can do it. I think it's fantastic.
I mean, there are two legal brains here. Let me get you on this one now. All of this leads to one person, and that is Jami. And as much as he had accomplices, there was a system in place that also, helped him in all of this. It all leads to him at the end of the day. Government has taken a very bold step. The intention has been made clear. You've heard the minister's statement, very strong. You look at the white paper, the first name that comes up is Jami. Jami's prosecution. Government says it is taking all recommendations as far as his prosecution is concerned. We're talking about hundreds here.
I believe that the recommendations for the prosecution of the former president are reasonable and done in good faith, if you ask me, because some people would tell you that he was not the one that actually killed or actually raped or actually ensured people disappeared. But I will tell them that he bear the greatest responsibility as a head of state, because being a president and being in charge of a government and also the commander-in-chief, because most of these crimes were committed by security forces, members of the security forces, that he was, so he bears the command responsibility, and then he bears the personal responsibility to a certain extent. So to say, because the government has a primary responsibility of protecting its citizens. So for example, the issues of enforced disappearances. Okay, you might not be directly involved. Somebody would say that, okay, there is nothing to say that you are the one that actually did it. But again, there is this strong irrebuttable presumption that under your government, if there happens to be any form of enforced disappearances, you have the primary mandate to investigate and then make sure you bring to account those that are responsible. So the failure of any head of state or a government to ensure that these enforced disappearances were investigated and then brought to account, it is where your responsibility lies.
And this reminds me of Korosis's case.
Exactly.
It was never investigated.
He was a serving member of the state, a citizen for that matter, and his disappearance
cabinet minister for that matter.
Exactly. So the government has a responsibility. If only they were concerned about what happened and they were clean from what happened, they will actually investigate like any other crime that is committed in our backyards. So these are things that would Jammeh cannot be free in any way because it was done under his watch, and he cannot say he was not aware of all what was happening because you are a president, you have a responsibility. Sure. So this sends a signal to anybody that is in government, anybody that has a position of authority. The minister said it, that we would be accountable for whatever we do, and that is something that we must note as well. And also there is one important element of the minister's speech that he said, and I believe it's important for us to talk about, is that reconciliation has to be balanced with justice. You know, people were talking about...
I think the Tango chairman also made a similar statement.
People were talking about justice before reconciliation, or there cannot be reconciliation, but then it was right that it has to be balanced. Where there must be reconciliation, we reconcile. Where there must be justice in any way, it happens. So reconciliation is justice in another way. So, but then we should not also lose sight of the fact that as a nation who underwent a lot of troubles and a lot of hurdles, we really need to heal. There must be healing at the end of the process. We cannot continue to revisit our past. That would also defeat the future of this country. So we must also accept, alongside the feelings and the emotions that we are going through a lot, that we must heal at one point. So that healing too is part of the process, and that comes to the society to a greater extent, that we must accept what happened, accept what we have learned, and also fought for a greater future, because we must move on as well.
Council, talking about bearing responsibility, this reminds me of the junglers. You look at the crimes they committed. This was a special unit created by the president, and they were answerable directly to him. Even though there was a system in the army, you had a chief of staff, you had the command in place, but they were, answering directly to the president. Talking about bearing responsibility, the reason I said all of this leads to Jammeh, for the most part, he bears responsibility for most of these things, as, of course, being revealed by the commission during the public hearings.
Absolutely right. He bears the greatest responsibility without a doubt, because he was responsible for everything. For one, directly ordering some of these violations and abuses, but also creating the environment that enabled such a system to operate and flourish. The junglers that you mentioned were an outfit within the army structure, but were directly under his command. So he picked and chose individuals that he believed would be able to carry out these things as he wished. So if you look at everything that happened, in terms of also bearing the greatest responsibility, one, the one state agency that was as complicit as any other institution was the National Intelligence Agency. The National Intelligence Agency was almost used by Jammeh as an instrument to oppress, but also to sustain the system, but in a way that the kind of brutality that was carried out at the NIA. So he chose people that he wanted there, but also when individuals, and if you look at the NIA, you then look at the army, and you look at the junglers. So for example, people who were suspected of planning military coups, these people were arrested and taken to Mile 2. In the middle of the night,
you have the junglers, take them, transport them to the NIA premises to be interrogated and tortured and punished and violated. But in the midst of that, then he also had some of his state guards who were there to be present to actually witness the carrying out of this activity so that they can go back to him. Last year, I actually worked at the TRRC towards the end as the local legal consultant, and I helped with the others in the legal team to put together the final report. Last year around this time, it was almost a year ago around this time in May last year, when we visited Kanilai and other parts of Foni. In his own compound in Kanilai, because obviously this is a large compound, and in the farms, it's a few minutes drive away from the residential part, but this is all part of his that he's annexed and taken to be his personal property. The dog thing, these are to exhume bodies. So because we went with Omar Oya Jallow and Malik Jatta, and there were other intelligence roles, there were advanced teams that were digging to excavate. So some of the individuals that were killed, not least, the two Gambian Americans.
Yes. Yeah, Mahmoud Cisse
and Job.
Yes.
So the allegations that these people were killed and buried in there, but we visited so many parts of Foni, vast lands from here to the traffic light. These were seized and taken by Yaya Jammeh. We were taken to one part, which is a very secluded part by Oya. So one of the Ghanaian migrants who was, because they took a shooting ground, so these people were there and they were shot, and one of them escaped. He was caught by the villagers, and the junglers came to pick him up. So they brought him to this whatever, and Oya Jallow took us to the spot where this guy was butchered and shot in cold blood. But all those secluded parts, and some have been fenced, well, I think all of them have been fenced. These are all lands owned by Yaya Jammeh. So he was very deliberate in where bodies were actually deposited. We were also taken to sites where the guys who allegedly set the APRC bureau on fire, Tumani Jallow, and I think Alaji Cham, I can't remember the other, where they were also buried as well. So if you look at where most of these individuals, so they were killed by the junglers, but buried on Yaya Jammeh's soil, on land that he owned. This is to try and evade.
And knowing Jammeh back then, no one dared
do
that.
But there are other instances as well. The attempted murder of Usman Silla. You know, he was ordering and General Sorbaji saying that he could have finished, and Jammeh not have been happy afterwards that he didn't do as instructed. But the murder of Dera Hydra as well, on the phone being had by Tumbul Tamba, they were relaying information as they were following, tailgating this individual. But there's another, I think Mustafa Koli, a former soldier as well, who was ambushed by the junglers, taken to their residence in Kololi, killed. They strangled him. He was a taxi driver, so they took him to Jabang. Then it was very remote, and Jammeh specifically instructed them to place him in the car, like they did. With
Elo Jallow.
With Elo Jallow. So this shows you Jammeh's complicity, direct complicity in all these atrocities, but also his institutional control of how the entire system worked, both in terms of the army, the police, the NIA, and the junglers as well. And therefore, taking this as a whole, Yaya Jammeh is more criminally liable and complicit than any other individual.
Mr. Mboj, before I bring in Fatu, still on bearing responsibility, the Jammeh administration's inaction, to investigate some of these crimes. I did mention Korosise earlier. I mean, he mentioned Dera Hydra, the Chief Ibrahim Mane case as well. We know he was in state custody, before he went missing. His administration's inaction to investigate these crimes, and we're talking about people who are known who are known all over this place. Isn't that a sign of complicity as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there'll be much argument when we say that really all paths lead to Yaya Jammeh. Absolutely. That much, nobody can argue. And just as when our two guests here were talking, I just recalled what Harry Truman, former president of the U.S., had a sign in his office: the buck stops here. That's precisely with Yaya Jammeh. The buck stops with the former president. Everything, I think it has been established. Now it's a matter of just going to prosecute and do what we need to do. And this justice, reconciliation, as if they are binaries talking about two different things. I think one can say that justice is a precondition of reconciliation. That's how tight they are. And when we talk about reconciliation, what do we mean? Here we're doing something else. We're trying to reconstruct. People who use these terms tell you that actually reconciliation is a kind of reconstruction. Something has been damaged. So we are trying to put something else back together. That is really what
all right, so we go back to my colleague Aliou Cisse at the Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara Conference Center where the event is taking place. Aliou?
Yes, Ansumana, thank you very much. Like you said, we're still at the conference center and we're still trying to talk to some of the attendees here regarding their take on the, of course, the statement made by the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. And I'm glad to say I have with me Aissatou Jammeh and Ami Silla, daughters of Haruna Jammeh and Usman Silla, who were murdered by the junglers under the former regime of ex-President Yaya Jammeh. And now Aissatou and Miss Ami. Let me start with Aissatou. Aissatou, first and foremost, how do you react to the statement made by the minister?
Thank you very much, Aliou. So for me, it has been surprisingly positive. To be honest, I must say I wasn't expecting this because expectations were really high on the side of the victims,
ladies and gentlemen.
Because I, as a victim, I used to think that whether or not the government would really come up with something positive.
We would like to start the press conference now. Can we please have some order in the room?
Which was the CRC. What really happened? There was a bit of selective justice, and then we had seen the Jammeh Commission, what had happened. But thank God, what I've heard so far from the Minister of Justice, it has been positive. And what really stand out for me was that prosecutions was being mentioned as well. People that who bear the highest responsibilities will be prosecuted, and those who committed international crimes as well. And also those that alleged perpetrators and are still holding offices, government offices, would be suspended, and then at the end of the day they would be removed. So that was really something that really stand out for me.
And for you, Ami, what actually stands out for you in the minister's statement?
Thank you for this. To be honest, like she said, it sounds very promising to hear all that after all these years. We have been waiting for it for way too long. We would also like to say a job well done to the TRRC. But then for the government's involvement in all this, for all victims, it sounds very promising. But one thing we really can't wait for is the implementation, especially like Aissatou just said, of some of the alleged perpetrators holding offices in the government to see. He mentioned the word termination, and I would definitely want to use that word again.
Thank you so much, Aissatou Jammeh and Ami Silla, daughters of Haruna Jammeh and former lawyer Usman Silla, who were murdered by the Jammeh's junglers. And Sumana, I mean, you're far from them. I mean, it seems everyone here is happy with what they see as a quite promising move as far as the TRC is concerned. We will now go back to the hall where the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Dawda Jallow, is currently holding a press conference.
Indeed, talking about a press conference, well, I was actually going to talk about that. Thank you so very much, Aliou. We'll come back to you. I'm afraid we'll have to link to the main chamber where the Minister of Justice is being engaged by members of the press. We'll be back after this.
Foreign judges as mercenary judges. The reason for rejection is from a public policy point of view. These foreign nationals are no longer serving in the Gambia. They have been recommended to be banned from holding public office in the Gambia. This recommendation probably serves no purpose because they are no longer in the Gambia. Number two, they came from sister countries with whom we have very good bilateral relations. And the government does not want to jeopardize our bilateral Government doesn't want to jeopardize our bilateral relationship with those sister countries who stood by us from independence to date. They have been providing us with a lot of technical assistance in different areas, in health, in the judiciary, in justice sector, in education, in various areas. These countries have been providing technical assistance to the Gambia, and they continue to provide technical assistance to the Gambia. Of course, there is no doubt that the former president used the judiciary to do some wrong things. But that was not unique to foreign nationals only. So to only single out foreign nationals and characterize them as mercenary judges as the commission characterized them is not something as a government we can accept. So we decided to reject that. Oh, okay. The second one, I think on top of my head, is the recommendation for amnesty for the former vice chairman of the AFPRC, junta. That is Sana Sabali, was recommended to be granted amnesty, and the government decided to reject it at this stage.
Sorry, excuse me. From this way, we're starting and going. Sorry. I started from this way. Mr. Singh?
Gentlemen, we agree to be orderly. Just wait. Can you wait, please? You are not chairing the session. We agree to be orderly. So you cannot just jump. Just give time. Your question will be asked. Can you look at me? We want this press conference to be orderly. Please. Can you please? You cannot impose yourself. Wait to be given a turn. Please. Just wait for your turn. Your question will be asked.
Honorable Minister, Papsen, the Point newspaper and representative of Reuters, you already said that government has implemented all the recommendation of the TRC. Yes. Now, what will be the fate of the former president Yahya Jammeh? Are you going to issue international warrant to be prosecuted or not?
What I can say for certain, the former president Yahya Jammeh will face justice. The modalities of how we go about this is being worked on. We're working on a prosecution strategy that will inform the processes of going about it. In any event, President Jammeh will face justice for the atrocities that he committed in this country.
Thank you very much. Mustafa Kedawa, please. I have two related questions, and maybe I could put them together. The first one is the recommendation about the burning of Usman, the director of SIS. Of course, this was rejected on the basis that the commission does not fall under the mandate of the commission, because this crime allegedly happened after 2017. But the other side of the fact is that the evidence that Usman was alleged to have tampered with bears on the substance of the cases investigated by the TRC. It's like a legacy issue. I don't know what you think of that, whether you think that maybe the government erred in its judgment. And also the issue of Yankuba Sonko. I mean, the white paper claims there are two related. The issue of Yankuba Sonko, the former interior minister who was accused of tampering with evidence in relation to West African migrants' murder. It was it was rejected on the basis that some new evidence emerged, or that some new evidence was supplied by Yankuba or some other person. What is that evidence? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I do not think government erred in the issue of Usman. In our own classification, we do not classify that as a rejection, but it's subject to how you look at it. This is the director of SIS. He is recommended not to be prosecuted, but recommended to be banned from holding public office. The grounds for this recommendation is the alleged tampering of evidence at the NIA headquarters sometime, I believe, in May 2017. We all know it's an open secret that the TRC's mandate is from July 1994 to January 2017. So what happened in May 2017 falls outside of their mandate. So it was only premised on that. Of course, if these are issues that government will look into, that is a separate thing. So the position of government was only looking at what falls within TRC mandate as we worked on the white paper. So because it fell outside of the mandate of the TRC, it cannot properly form part of their recommendation. So that was it. With respect to Honorable Yankuba Sonko, we are in fact going probably to refer that matter very soon to an impartial, independent body to look into it. I'm not able to provide you new evidence at the moment, but the important thing is steps have been taken. Probably this might be the reason why you don't see him in the new cabinet, and then the issue will be looked into properly, and a decision will come out.
Yusuf Taylor for Gynaco News. My question is regards to the 150 million and the victims bill. What is your contingency plan? The bill will be tabled at the National Assembly, I believe. If it's not passed in time, so that that 150 million could be used this year, will your ministry, which is an implementing institution, ensure that that 150 is dispensed to the victims so that the reconciliation process would be smoother? And just to add to that, our counterparts, you talked about foreign relations, 54 West Africans, and I believe about 32 million also. There's not been much talk about that. I did ask you in a previous press conference, what is happening? Are they also being paid? Because that was being agreed to be paid between government to government, foreign affairs probably. Clarity, sir.
Thank you very much. I start from where you stopped. The the West African migrants' reparation payment have not been effected yet. TRC, as part of the interim reparations they were dispensing to payments on, did not pay to them. They did not pay anything to them. So it's for government. So those are some of the residual responsibilities government have taken over with respect to reparation. On your first question, the bill is at consultative stage at the moment. If consultation is completed, of course we intend to table it. We are more or less halfway into the year now. Maybe the consultation that is going on will advise us what we can do in the event that the bill is not likely to make it through the National Assembly before the end of the year. What are we going to do with what has been budgeted? But I need to make clear that reparation and compensation, government have assumed full responsibility, and government is committed to paying compensation to the victims that is adequate. So whichever way, I understand if we say it locally, if somebody is hungry and you tell him to go wash your hands, it's difficult for the victims. We are very sensitive to their plight. But we want to make sure that whatever funds are earmarked for the victims' compensation is properly administered, and we don't want to play a role as a government. So we had had initial consultations with them, whether we can have interim arrangements of such monies, how it's going to be managed. We are yet to be very clear about if, in the absence of that impartial body that we intend to set up under the bill, before that is set up, can we have any other interim arrangement? Probably, I hope the consultations that are going on may come up with an idea. But at this point, not yet. The intention is to set up that body as quickly as we possibly can and pay such money into that fund and let it be managed by that body. Yeah.
Can you please confirm that you will ensure that the government ensures that that 150 million stays in this 2022, it's spent in 2022, so that it's another, probably, because there's still about 50 million or so left. 50 is paid this year, there is still more that your government will make sure that money is dispensed this year, sir.
Let me make one point clear. There is nothing like arrears in compensation to the victims. That needs to be very clear. Just to say that a 50 million or 100 million or a particular amount of million was promised at one point and it didn't come at that material moment doesn't make it an area. Our intention is we are committed to paying reparation to them. We are even committed to have a complete re-evaluation of what is appropriate, even to those who may have received payment. So let us not treat the issue of reparation as if government is owing money. It's not owing. It's a commitment of government to adequately compensate victims. So the issue of arrears does not arise. Whenever these monies are available, it is an ongoing process and it will continue to be an ongoing. So I want to dispel that thinking to treat as government promised a particular amount a particular year, so the whole of that amount did not come, therefore the balance is an area. No, there is no issue of area here. Whatever amount is established to be due will be paid. How and when, these are issues that every government grapples with. What I can confirm for you is it is budgeted. I've been informed by the Ministry of Finance when the new budget was passed that such amount was earmarked for the victims. If it is ready to be made available to the victim, it will be made available. But there is no doubt that government, not only government, committed to work with partners to make sure that victims are adequately compensated. But it's an ongoing process. So the issue of arrears doesn't arise.
Yes, sir. I'm Alain Mbai, Gambia Radio and Television Services. My question is, we talk about the issue of those holding public positions and their mention adversely in the commission and their suspension issue. How soon do we expect this thing to happen? Because we've just talked about the processes and there is no how and when. So some of the victims will be eagerly waiting to see these people leave those public positions. How soon do we expect them? Is it May, June, or whatever?
We committed to implement that immediately. So notices will be sent to the institutions that they work, and we expect they will be put on immediate suspension from duty. But remember, one of the things that we all yearn for is rule of law. So we will have to look at the legal procedures of either whether some of them will have to be outrightly dismissed, terminated, or retired. But while we are going to look at those legal issues, we agree as a government that they will immediately be suspended from work until those administrative steps are taken.
My name is Mohamed Mbai Garmi. I work from Gambian Talents TV, and then my question will be asked in local language. jëwriñ gu ñu dénk wàllu yoon ci réew mi maa ngi lay siyaare ndax xalaat ngeen ne ñu ëpp ci victimes yi dégguñu li nga xam ne mooy nasaraan tey téere bi ngeen tënk xaatim ko muy white paper bi ci nasaraan ngeen ko tënk ñu ci bari tey ñi ngi seetaan xëy na ñi xool lan la white paper bi wax lan ak lan la war def ndax teg ngeen ay jumtuwaay yi ngir mën koo yàggalee ñoom ci seeni làkk yu ñu dégg ngir ñu mën a jot xibaar bi xam lan ngeen tënk ci white paper boobule jërëjëf.
waaw dinañ ko xelaat bu dépense bi matee dinañ ko làppatoo si yeneen lang yeneen laaka boobu dafa soxla benn koom-koom waaye ñaareel foog nga am nit ñi nga xam ne dégg nañ laaka yi pour ñu mën a jël book bi pour ñu translate ko si local languages yi waaye loolu amuñ si benn problème mun nañoo ut ndimbal pour def loolu. The question was, most of the victims don't speak English, and they probably don't understand what is contained in the white paper. And he was asking whether we have any plans to translate the white paper into local languages for some who could not read it in English. I say, of course, yes. It's something that we are not averse to. We can consider doing that, provided that we get support in terms of the cost. But also, translation into local languages requires expertise, people who are competent to do this translation. If they are available and the resources are available, we said that we were going to work on an effective communication strategy. And this communication strategy is something that can consider translating, if not the whole white paper as a volume, but to abridge it and summarize it in the local languages for those who can read only in local languages.
Okay, I'm Mahmoud. I'm from Paradise TV. I just have a simple one question. You mentioned that two judges that were allegedly considered called mercenary judges to be exempted. And we saw a publication that two former justice ministers, two justice high court chief judges actually are to sue the government for a sum of $100 million for not giving them opportunity for fair hearing at the TRRC. Is it because of the 100 million they were exempted, or are they actually exempted because it's not right to call?
No. It has nothing to do with the suit. In fact, I believe as at the time we took this position not to accept that recommendation, the suit was not within our contemplation. We weren't even aware of it. If my office was aware, it was not at my level, because I remember even yesterday texting my Solicitor General when I saw that media report that two former Chief Justices have sued the Gambia. I texted the Solicitor General and asked, have we been served with this suit? And you all aware, I think it was last week or a week before that Cabinet considered the white paper. So our position on that issue have nothing to do with the suit that they have filed. And be rest assured, we would meet them in the court, and we will adequately defend that position. So it has nothing to do with the suit. We've taken that position before I was even aware that these two individuals have filed a suit against the government of the Gambia.
Okay, good afternoon, Honorable Minister. I am Khadija Tujao with Malagan. So from the white paper, it indicated that some junglers, including Malik Jata, could be given amnesty, depending on how useful they will be to the prosecution strategy. So my question is there any template that determines who will be given amnesty or not?
That position arises from the recommendation, amnesty recommendation of the TRRC itself. They've recommended a couple of junglers, including Malik Jata that you mentioned, Omar Jallo, and I think another person, due to the cooperation that the TRRC recognized, their cooperation with the Commission, that they should be granted amnesty. So our position in the white paper is fine. We are not outrightly rejecting that recommendation, but we would want to explore possibilities of negotiating with these gentlemen because we believe they could be very useful to the prosecution that we are working on for people who bear the greatest responsibility of this atrocity. So it is a position that came out of the recommendations of the TRRC Amnesty itself, committee itself.
Yeah, my name is Alusise from Ganako. My name is Alusise from Ganako. Regarding about the amnesty, if Sana Sabal has been rejected, what will be the fate of the former Vice President Asadunja Sidi? And the other question is, has government decided on how to prosecute these people, either being used in our local court or international courts?
It shows you were not here when I read my statement, or if you were here, you were not listening. All your questions were answered in my statement, except for the specific mention of former Vice President, Her Excellency, Madam Aissatou Sedi. The Commission rejected her application for amnesty, and government did not differ with that position. The courts, if you get my statement, you will see how we intend to work with the courts, what setups we have.
My name is Fatou Samba. I work for the Gambian Talents Promotion or Gambian Talents TV. My question is, what challenges do you foresee in the implementation of the recommendation, and how do you hope to overcome these challenges?
The challenges are many. They are very, very many. However, the good thing is the political will is there. Government is committed. The rest is expertise is a challenge. Resources is a major challenge as well. How we intend to surmount some of these challenges is through partnership. We've enjoyed unprecedented support as a country from the beginning, since 2017. And we have no doubt that our partners will continue to stand by us, whether bilateral partners or multilateral partners. Once the resources are available, the political will is already available, the necessary expertise can be acquired. And the local expertise also can be enhanced. And with that, we can implement all the recommendations.
So, Honorable Minister, I want to know what is the timeline for setting up a prosecution office, a special prosecution office?
The timeline is yesterday. I want to do that as quickly as possible. We're just working on the modalities. The framework is being developed. Probably, if we are going to need a legislation, we are going to quickly work on that and then go through the legislative process. But we want to do it as quickly as possibly we can.
Thank you very much. Yusuf Taylor again for Gainako. So until now, there's no body that has been set up and TRRC has concluded. Is any implementation going to take place until the body is set up? What I want to know, is anything action going to happen in between now until this body is set up? Because victims have nowhere to go.
There is a lot that is being done. I don't know where you are looking at in terms of implementation. What I even said that some people will immediately be suspended is part of implementation. Legislative reform, the bill that is going through consultation, is part of implementation. And other administrative, the white paper is part of implementation. So it depends on what you call implementation. But a lot of activities are going to be happening. And setting up of that body is just one of many things that we need to be implementing. So it's a broad line of activities, and we are not waiting for anything. We are moving on immediately.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister. So in your speech, you mentioned grave sites will be find out. You will find out some of these grave sites. I am Bana Sabale, I work for West Coast Radio, by the way. So how would you be able to do this? Because the TRRC, to some extent, can't locate some of these grave sites. Thank you.
If you go through the white paper, you will see that TRRC recommended, for example, to seek the cooperation of Solo Bojang, one of the, I think, junglers, or whatever the case may be, former military officer, who is believed to be of material importance in this regard. However, we also counting on some support from some organizations that have got tremendous experience in this regard, and the search will be launched once we are ready. So TRRC did what they could do within the limited time that they had and the resources that they had to locate some of these burial sites. Some they could not reach, but witnesses have indicated to them where those places can be. So we have got some leads. Now it's a matter of having the required expertise and resources to follow those leads and see whether we can find something. It's an exercise that we have to undertake, and we will embark on that. It's a priority. Like I said, these families, the minimum they deserve is to bring a closure to their trauma, and identifying where their loved ones have been buried and recovering them and returning it to them for a dignified burial is the minimum the state can do for them. And we are committed to doing that.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, I am Modi S. Diouf, a correspondent for Bloomberg News in the Gambia. I would want to know whether we know how many people may be affected if you decide to go ahead on dismissing or suspending or taking into voluntary retirement perpetrators advancedly mentioned. The other question is, you said you would set up a special court. I want to know if you would seek to extradite Yahya Jammeh to the Gambia to be tried.
The statistics with respect to those who are affected with the ban from holding public office, your question will make me call some of my staff. I told them to give me the statistics, but it's not available to me. So no, I don't have it on top of my head. We will compute that immediately. And in fact, it should be available somewhere. It was just not handed to me before this press conference because I specifically asked for it. But no, on top of my head, I don't know how many in terms of number, but we know them because they have all been specifically named in the report. So we know them and we know the institutions where they work, and their institutions will be notified immediately for action. Extradition or no extradition, President Jammeh will face justice. The modalities are going to be contained on a prosecution strategy that is in a very advanced stage. The consultancy working on the prosecution strategy is due to submit their report end of this month. So that strategy will rely on and other consultations that are taking place to determine how, probably and where, will Jammeh face justice. But without doubt, he will face justice.
Yeah, I was going to ask something. Because I was reading the white paper, and like some key people were actually mentioned by their names. I noticed Solbaji was not mentioned, even though he was on the West African migrants. I checked on the West African, maybe I missed it. Okay, all right, maybe. About the courts, of course you said you were going to set up a court that is going to have both a local court that is going to have an international expert and a local expert. Considering the amount of resources this is going to require, has there been any partner that you had reached out to in terms of funding these activities? Of course, we also know that with regards to disappearances, there are still a number of outstanding cases that have not been dealt with by the TRC. In fact, I'm not sure we know who killed Chief Mane. What is the government going to do with this kind of cases, the remnants that TRC is passing?
That is why I said the Special Prosecution Division I will be setting will have investigative powers. So it will be a prosecution office that will also have well-experienced investigators attached to that division. So they will carry out further investigations in matters like that. Because not only Chief Mande's case that you mentioned, there are our preliminary assessment of the material evidence we received from the TRRC is completely clear to us that some of the material evidence we receive need further work, a lot more work. Some of them are not sufficient in terms of quality and quantity to prove the offenses before a court of law. I think we must all understand that it was an inquiry, it was not a court. So the standard by which they receive this evidence is completely different from the standard by which you need to tender this evidence in court of law. So this is going to be the function of the special prosecutor to open a case file against each individual. For each count, an individual has been recommended to be prosecuted, and then study the material that is already received from the TRRC and reach a determination whether we have got sufficient evidence to sustain those charges in court. If the answer is no, that is why the additional mandate is given to him to be able to investigate on his own without necessarily having to depend on our current law enforcement investigators. He could have his own investigation department that will be answerable to him as a prosecutor. Then they can investigate matters because they would know the gaps that they need to be filled up quickly. And then when they get the answers and they determine they are ready to proceed to court, they will proceed to court. So yes, there will be further investigations. We are quite aware of the fact that TRRC, even for matters that they have already started, some of them, they have not got all that we would require to proceed to court. But there are some issues that they did not even touch or touched in detail, and this will be the responsibility of this office.
Yes, Honorable Minister, equally the case of Bailo, we understand that he is already currently facing a trial in Germany. And with this new court that you will be setting up, are we going to see Bailo being brought back to the country and prosecuted, or is it going to be done in a hybrid manner? How would this work? The fact
Thank you. No, Bailo is being prosecuted under universal jurisdictions invoked by Federal Republic of Germany. So we are cooperating with the German authorities under what we call mutual legal assistance. We will support that trial, but we have no interest in discontinuing that trial. That trial will proceed to its logical conclusion. But the flip side of your question would be whether the outcome of such trial will have any bearing on our position in Bailo being recommended to be tried if he is. Of course, yes. Our current position is those that are being prosecuted under universal jurisdiction in foreign countries, and it's not only Bailo, Usman Sonko in Switzerland, Michael Correa in the United States of America, irrespective of the outcomes of those trials, they don't actually they don't enjoy automatical exoneration from trial in the Gambia. So that needs to be made clear. But we will allow those processes to conclude because they may be trying them for something and we might be wanting to try them for something different in the Gambia. So it is not a question of whether that trial will substitute for their possible trial in the Gambia, no. But we are not going to discontinue that. In fact, German authorities initiated that trial on their own discretion. So they will continue. And depending on the outcome of that case, we reserve our right as a sovereign country to deal with that issue separately in our own way. Okay, very unusual for a press conference. Okay, it looks like we don't have further questions. Maybe you are yet to digest the report, so when you digest it properly, maybe we'll have another round of this press conference. Yes, now we can extend it to non-media. If there's any non-media who wants to say something, ask a question or...
Okay.
We have Her Excellency the Ex-Vice President.
Excellencies, it's not a question. As they say in Wolof, Magbahni Chikir. Today, our responsibility as elders is to call on peace, to first of all congratulate the government of the Gambia under the leadership of His Excellency President Adama Barrow, to congratulate you, Honorable Minister of Justice and Attorney General with your team, to also congratulate the TRRC that has done wonderful work in this country. I say I congratulate you because the difficult part was not the TRRC. I think the most challenging part is to implement the recommendations of the TRRC. Everybody was expecting, and I think today our expectations have really been fulfilled, and we need to sincerely thank all the apparatus that were involved in this process. My second call is that now we need patience. We have been patient enough for 22 years. We never knew what was happening. We only guessed. We never knew what happened was things that were atrocities that were committed by our own brothers and sisters or whatever brothers. And today we have known the facts. After knowing the facts, we need to be patient for the implementation of the program. I like the way you have highlighted. You have given us substantive information in terms of the processes, the modalities of implementation. As a development practitioner, Rome was not built in a day, and there is no way we can expect you, your ministry, or the government to implement these recommendations in a day, or in a year, or 5 years. We need to be patient as citizens to know that we need to look for the resources. We need to look at the global economy, the impact, particularly the war in Ukraine is affecting. It's a global crisis that is trickling down to African economies. Already, we know the impact of COVID. It has affected the economy, the social strata, and even the people, particularly vulnerable groups. So we really need to be patient and know that mobilizing resources, the people who give us money are looking for monies, not to say we who don't have it. So we need to be patient, and we need to also respect our context. Today the context is peace and reconciliation. It's an onus on every one of us to be patient, to support the process, and to know that Rome was not built in a day, and that government is doing all that it can. And it takes everybody responsible, including myself, to advocate for partners to bring more resources so that we can fully implement the cause of justice. Gambia is peaceful, and we must hold on to the peace. Our name as a smiling coast was built by the 4 founding fathers. It's built on peace, and we must be peace. And I'm calling particularly the young people. We can be patient, but young people of today are not patient. They want everything tay. There is no nation that is going to be built on tay. We have to be patient, and we have to love each other. We have to unite. When we united for the same cause, God brought change for us. If we continue that unity of purpose, we will continue to have progress and advancement in our country, and that will trickle down to the sub-region. I apologize for coming late. I'm traveling from Madrid. I slept on the flight, and my luggage is in the car, but I thought it's a responsibility for me to come, not to disrespect you for coming late, but to explain to you the unique circumstances that made me to be late. I make myself as mother of the nation. I stand for peace, and I want everybody to embrace peace and to support the cause of justice through your leadership. I pray to God, and I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to give us that peace that God guides our government in the right path. We have said never again, and we will all stand up as a people to see that never again should Gambia and Gambians go through these atrocities in the history of our country. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much, and thank you very much. There is nothing more than thanking you. Thank you.
The final question from the President of the GPU. Save the best for last.
Actually, probably it's just a request from the ministry, my uncle. It's like the revival of your frequent press briefings. This is a concern. I think when you were doing it, it was so good. Looking at the task ahead, it is so important for the ministry to really engage the media to ensure that there is transparency, accountability, and as well the public to also have that understanding of the process itself. So that's a request. Please kindly, engage into those things. Thank you.
You're putting your uncle on the spot. Well, yes, we're working on an effective communication strategy. You will not be left behind in this. I directed that communication strategy, in as much as we want the press to take a lead, I want the victims also to take a lead in the outreach activities. The ministry will continue to reach out to the press. Yes, when I took over the ministry, I know the ministry was known for frequent press conferences. I have not been doing it. The press has always been my friend. But I'll be working behind the scene. When it is necessary for me to come out and talk, I will definitely talk. But the ministry is reachable at any time. Any one of you wants information from the ministry, feel free to contact us. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can. And together we can get there. Thank you very much. Since this was the show for the press, I take this singular opportunity once again to thank you, the press, for turning out in your large numbers. And we hope to work with you as we go through the implementation of the recommendations of the Commission. Thank you very much for turning out.
The Attorney General and the Minister of Justice there, Honorable Dauda A. Jallow. Interesting discussion there. Exchange with members of the press. I think most of the things that we were talking about since morning, we've heard him, deliberate extensively on some of these things and how government intends to go about implementing, most of these recommendations. We did talk about, the lack of capacity, the resources that would be involved, the process. We know it takes time, but from some of those interventions, like I said, the expectations are high, but people want to see things happening fast. However, it doesn't work like that. Council?
No, that's right. First, at least government is showing commitment, but like the minister repeated, there's going to be a long road. I think they're still working on the modalities. Even the special sort of court, which looks like it's going to be a mixture of domestic and international, would require money, would require expertise, would require really specialized technical knowledge, and everything. So the registry system. So there is countries that has gone through this. This is not an easy job. So. But I think civil society and all the relevant stakeholders, the ECOWAS, African Union, and the European Union, and the UN, we need as much money as possible. We need as much support, technical support as much as possible, support in terms of expertise, while we forge a roadmap to implement the TRRC recommendation. So today is a very important chapter in this whole process. But today it's just one component as well. So you know, a lot of us will want to see some of these things immediately, but this is a long process, and it will take over time.
We've seen so much international interest in the Commission's work, and even beyond that. I mean, I'm checking online, and I could see, you know, some of the UN systems on their social media feeds, you know, talking about how important this is and how much they appreciate government's, you know, sort of, you know, that will to implement the recommendations.
Yeah. So actually, this shows you that we are in a global world. The Gambia is not an island. Obviously, without the intervention of those international partners, I would say this would not have been possible. Because we could have the ideas, we could have the willingness to do it, but without the resources and the expertise, it's just a dream, and then we would never realize it. Yeah. So obviously the international community invested hugely in either technical or support or resource mobilization, that is funds, to make sure the TRRC is a success. So that is obviously the reason why they have so much interest. And again, it shows that their monies and their support has not gone in vain. So, and I'm sure they will continue to support. And that is why they are all happy and they're all celebrating, and at the same time sharing the moments that we have as Gambians, because we are partners in development. And also Gambia is a member to most of, if not all of these international organizations, and as well as we sign laws and regulations that relates to our bilateral and multilateral cooperations as a country or a globe. So obviously they are part of the process because they facilitated, even though they were not the local actors. They did not pioneer or champion the cause or the actions and the outcome, but at least their support was there to ensure that what we wanted as a country is something that we realize.
Mr. Mboch?
Yes, we've entered a new phase in our transitional justice in the process. That's really what it was today. The white paper is not going to give you the nuts and bolts of implementation. White papers are not meant for that sort of thing. So we heard all sorts of questions regarding the details. That's not going to go now. But at least we've got the broad direction that we want to go. There will be controversies already we were hearing. What about the DG of SIS? So how come you decided that? Yankuba Sonko, how come you decided that? We are going to go through all of these things. There would be the compromises, not least because of what Council said earlier, that you might need some of these people to be your witnesses in a prosecution of the biggest fish, the biggest beast, as I call it, in this matter. So this is it. Let us brace ourselves and realize that this is going to be a long haul.
Yeah.
Really. So the impatience, the wanting it now, for things to happen now, that is unrealistic. We have to be mature about these things, not least from the media. Sometimes it appears as if we do not make a distinction between journalism and activism. If you want to be an activist, be one. If you want to be a journalist, be one. Because we will help the country, as it were. We adjust our expectations to reality. That's the best way. Otherwise, very soon we'll be so disappointed. Oh, look at how slow this is. Oh, look at this is not going right. Oh, look at that. So it takes collective maturity here, and I think the press CSOs will play a huge part in how we go forward from now.
He also did mention reparations. I mean, I can remember him saying what they want is life-changing reparations, not just monetary, you know, but you know, you did also talk about, you know, victims wanting different things. You know, what reparations may look like to you may be different from what the victim wants, and I think he also did talk about that. But you had the minister's response to that as well.
Yes, that is so. But before I come to that, I just wanted to add on what you said. We must all emphasize on the fact that it is something that would take a process, and it might take longer than we expect. So these are things that we should foresee. So it would not be fair
for us to just start making noise after 6 months, 1 year, when things are in progress. Because remember, there are recommendations that deals with institutional reforms. There are recommendations that deal with even societal orientation, because he mentioned about sexual and gender-based violence. These are things that are deeply rooted in our society. Most of the society is highly patriarchal, and then to change that mindset, so it's all part of the TRRC implementation process. So it's not only about government, but the society too needs to change. We need to rehabilitate and also to restructure some of our mentality that we have, because these are the members of society that would hold positions of responsibility. So if our mindset is not open to the reason that these are crimes against humanity and we shouldn't do them, then we will be going back and forth again. So society also needs to rebuild and reconstruct itself. And that takes a process. And again, the government might start what we want to see, or what we expect is the institutional reforms to take place and the legal framework to start, so that if this government cannot, and it's not possible for them to implement everything, let us be realistic. So if they have the framework already, then at least another government will have a stepping stone or a foundation to build on, and then continue the process. So we need to also look at that. And the reparations as well, you said, the minister mentioned those things. And the good thing is that it's a commitment by the government, and it will be done. So it's a must happening thing. So what we need to do is to ensure that these reparations are done in an independent and impartial manner, because we have seen the first batch of the compensation payments. We have victims. I personally engaged a victim of the April 2000, and really the person was not satisfied with what was happening, and they have a lot of reservations. So we believe that these are learning points for the current government and those that would be engaged in the reparation process. Let it be victim-centered, let them be sensitive, and then it should not just be any amount of money. Sometimes you might not need the money, but you need that medical attention for the rest of your life to change the condition that you are living in. Sometimes you need that fund to ensure that you are economically independent. So those are the things. Look at people and what they need, then this is what would make it a success, but not the amount of money.
I think I heard him also mention that they're in fact looking at the possibility of re-evaluating.
That was great.
These reparations that they're given to victims. But potential, yes.
No, that's fantastic. And I think for the victims, because for those who lost loved ones, TRRC, I think the maximum was 600,000. The Faraba Commission recommended $1 million. But remember, I think only 4 or 5 people or 3 lost their lives in that, compared to the TRRC, more individuals. So, and also the TRRC, in terms of reparations, is a far wider period to deal with. But the fact that the minister is now saying that this reparations bill, or the victims bill, which will establish a statutory body, an independent body, that will look into the issue of reparations, compensation part, but also now even re-evaluating some of the victims, because again, that goes back to what I was saying. So one of the widows of November 11th, who was talking about financial challenges. So for people like it, will be enormously happy to hear that there may be a chance of getting a little bit more money from the state, because what that does as well, it speaks to the restoration of their dignity. You know, so and it also serves, has this real impact and meaning in their lives as well. But for me, the TRRC, the truth, reconciliation, and reparation. And reparation, for the most part, we tend to focus on financial reparation. But for me, you look at our history, see, Jammeh captured the state. The entire government machinery, sort of like public institutions, kind of like became dysfunctional, or they operated to a large extent to sustain his dictatorship. So the judiciary, the ministry, and all these other institutions as well, in a way, colluded. So for me, for a country like the Gambia, reimagine from a dictatorship, trying to reconstruct our country, I think institutional reforms, for me, is probably the most important, because if we get everything right, then never again doesn't just become a slogan, it becomes a reality. And to achieve that, there also has to be, apart from everything today, there has to be genuine political will and commitment to make so. So the Honorable Attorney General Minister referred to legislative reforms as well. So we need to have, there are certain laws enacted by Jame, by the National Assembly, that are not consistent with our democratic aspirations. So therefore, some of those laws need to go away. Some of the laws are very colonial and repressive. Some of those laws need to go away. The draft constitution, perhaps the elephant in the room, the draft constitution, if the government wants also genuine commitment and political will, because the draft constitution is not a perfect document, but it really speaks to our aspirations, it really speaks to our circumstances, and it really speaks to our pursuit of genuine transformative justice. So therefore, perhaps charity begins at home. Government may begin to sort of like revitalize that conversation in relation to the draft constitution, because that as the overarching legal instrument will probably show a genuine commitment by government that government is really serious about these legal reforms.
Important. I mean, of late, there's been talk around reviving it and all that. We've heard even from the minister himself. But I'm being notified that we have, a couple of minutes to the end of the program. It's been an interesting discussion. But let me begin with Fatu. What next? Where do we go from here?
And I wanted to interestingly say what next, then you said it for me. So that was what I wanted. So this question of what next, everybody should ask themselves, what next, what can we do to ensure that the implementation is not hindered. And then also I have an advice to the honorable members of the National Assembly. They are very important in making sure that we have legal and institutional reforms, because everything would start with the legality. So the draft constitution, I have been an advocate throughout, and I will continue to advocate for its revitalization, because these degrees and other operations had a footing because of the 1997 constitution. True. So if we want to move ahead, we need that. And let them cooperate with government for all bills that are progressive on implementation of the national or the TRRC recommendations.
Thank you, Fatu. Country?
Finally, I think the TRRC, the submission report today, everything is important, but I want to pay tribute to victims. We are all victims, but some victimizations were more severe and more impactful than others. So victims across the length and breadth of our country, watching the Honourable Minister speak with authority and sense of direction and purpose, I think in a way this is for them. This is to tell them that, like you said earlier, that when some of these things were happening on the Ajame, that we probably never thought that in our lifetime something like this would happen. And today we're here, which coincides with Ajame's birthday. So I think this is a really nice cake for him.
Ali called it his birthday gift.
Yeah, for government to say we accept the recommendations of the TRRC in pursuit of justice for victims, and also in a way certain this issue of impunity that pervaded our country for 22 years.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, for me, people sort of focusing more on Yaya Jammeh's birthday. I'm going the other way. Africa Day. ALD, as we used to call it. I think that's more appropriate. Here at the beginning of our program, we heard from Aisha Jammeh. His father was killed. And that phrase, broken families. I'm not sure what amount of reparations really can mend such a loss. You know what I mean? There's a hole in there that people will have to live with. The disappointment, the pain, that's all going to be in there. But let us try not to be disagreeable as a country, you know. So the closure will come, but it's going to be a very, very, very slow process. So we must have the patience, yeah, the belief, as it were, that we have conquered very, very difficult things. We overcame Yaya. Now we've got this inquiry, white paper, so next we're implementing. We are making strides, we are making progress, very slow. Sometimes it seems to digress and back. There will be so many disappointments. What we are accomplishing significant milestones. Let's continue this. And if you're going to be disagreeable, let us be productively disagreeable, if one can put it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Mboj. The two councils, Fatu Jao and Councillor Abdullahi Fati, and of course to our colleague Alusise, who was, or who is, actually still there at the conference center for us this morning. And of course, on behalf of the entire production team, we want to thank all of you out there. Of course, not forgetting those of you following us online on our various social media sites and on radio as well, because we've been broadcasting on Q Radio, on 103.3 on the FM belt. On behalf of Mr. Mboj and the two councils, I am Ansmane Sonyasi, and we're saying thank you for being with us since morning. Well, we've had an extended, this morning. Yes. So but thank you for being with us. We hope to, be with you some other time. I'm sure the discussions would continue. But then, thank you so very much.